741 The Heavenly Pavilion Part 1. Shua. Wan Jia's hand was separated from his body, turning into fine pieces of flesh and blood, which fell on his face. Blood spurted out from the wound and also landed on his body. Wan Jia screamed and cursed. Exclamation mark! His eyes were filled with fear and regret. Yi Lingling seemed to be completely immersed in torturing Wan Jia. At this moment, someone made a move. A figure appeared out of nowhere and a golden rope flew toward Yi Lingling to bind her. All sorts of formations and restrictions were also activated instantly. It was the Heavenly Pavilion. The mysterious pavilion master had actually personally made a move. Moreover, his strength was beyond imagination, and everyone could tell that he had surpassed the Emperor realm. Furthermore, he was not alone, as a group of pavilion guardians attacked as well. In order to obtain Yi Lingling's opportunity, the Heavenly Pavilion had expended quite a bit of resources. From their perspective, no matter how strong Yi Lingling was, she was only an Emperor realm cultivator. Some of the experts looked at each other and were ready to make a move. However, they all suppressed their impulses and waited for the best opportunity. "I've been waiting for you." Yi Lingling's body exploded with a powerful aura as she unsheathed her sword. Sword intent surged and materialized into tangible form. The first swing of her sword cut the golden rope to pieces. The second swing broke the formations and restrictions were also instantly broken. The third swing was like a wave, sweeping in all directions, killing many of the pavilion guardians. The pavilion master was a second-level supreme realm cultivator. Even so, he still felt a strong sense of danger from Yi Lingling's attacks. His expression changed drastically. He realized that she was far stronger than he predicted. Moreover, the sword was actually of a higher grade than the Heaven Glimpse board. As soon as they started fighting, the pavilion master knew that the Heavenly Pavilion alone would not be able to handle her. "Let's all attack together, the Heavenly Pavilion won't monopolize the opportunity." After the pavilion master spoke, the Emperor realm experts who had been waiting joined the fray. They could tell that the Heavenly Pavilion would not be able to handle Yi Lingling, and were thus presented with two choices. They could either dispel the idea of snatching the opportunity, or join forces with the Heavenly Pavilion. However, in this remote section, when one's cultivation reached the peak of the Emperor realm, there would be no further progress. Thus, the temptation of advancing further was far too great. In an instant, a dozen Emperor realm experts attacked. They were all experts on the Emperor ranking list. At this moment, only the imperial family of the Great Victory Empire did not get involved. Yi Lingling was surrounded, and was also feeling pressured. However, she did not use the ethereal divine sword. Boom! The battle broke out, and in an instant, the Marquis of Swords' residence was razed to the ground. Yi Lingling swung her sword, and one of the Emperor realm experts fell to the ground, severely injured. As she did so, she was almost hit by the pavilion master. More and more Emperor realm experts joined in the battle. The scale of the battle grew larger and larger. When Yi Lingling saw that more and more buildings in the imperial city were being destroyed, she moved and broke out of the encirclement. She made her way out of the imperial city, and the pavilion master led the Emperor realm experts in pursuit. "Imperial family, are not going to make a move." The pavilion master's deep voice rang out. The current king stood above the imperial palace and watched the battle without issuing a response. Beside him was the Gen King. "Imperial uncle, do you think the Heavenly Pavilion can win? Since they failed to succeed in the beginning, they will fail in the end." Gen King squinted his eyes and said. The imperial family's Emperor realm experts were tempted as well. However, none of them dared to make a move rashly without the permission of the current king and Gen King. Outside the imperial city, the battle was intense. The imperial family brought their forces to the city wall to observe the battle. Their forces were waiting for orders. Everyone knew that, today, the world was going to change. Yi Lingling was fighting dozens of Emperor realm experts alone, including the second-level Supreme Realm Pavilion Master. One could imagine how great the pressure was. There were a few times when she fell into dangerous situations, but she still did not use the ethereal divine sword. Instead, she forced herself to continuously use all sorts of techniques, crushing the Emperor realm experts. As the battle continued, the Emperor realm experts were shocked to find how powerful Yi Lingling was. In fact, many people were already regretting their participation. However, backing out now was not an option. The pavilion master's face was extremely gloomy. Yi Lingling's power was beyond his imagination. Even though he knew that the imperial family of the Great Victory Empire wanted to reap the benefits without doing anything, He could not afford to divert any of his attention or power to deal with them. Boom. As the battle continued, all of the Emperor Realm experts started to use their trump cards to pressure Yi Lingling. Her sword intent surged out in waves, and her body was hidden within those waves. As the waves pulsated, they swept out toward the Emperor Realm experts, causing strong gusts of wind. These gusts of wind were laced with sword intent. The opportunity for a breakthrough had arrived. Yi Lingling took out a spiritual herb and swallowed it. Spiritual energy filled her body, and broke the barrier that had been holding her back. The Pavilion Master was shocked. She had broken through to the Supreme Realm. He was only able to break through because of the Heavenly Pavilion. He had once left this place and made a breakthrough in the outside world. However, Yi Lingling had a breakthrough here. Now, the outcome of the battle was already decided. The current king and the Gen King tacitly left the city wall with their forces in tow. Moments later, they reached the ancient pavilion, and barged in unceremoniously. Shua, Yi Lingling did not show mercy after breaking through, and made quick work of all of the Emperor Realm experts. The Pavilion Master quickly fled to the Imperial City. Yi Lingling held her sword in her hand and pursued him at a leisurely pace. A battle had broken out in the ancient pavilion, infuriating the Pavilion Master. The Imperial family had indeed taken the opportunity to attack the Heavenly Pavilion. A mirror-like jade tablet appeared in his hand. A ray of light shone brightly, and array formations and restrictions were suddenly activated inside the ancient pavilion. After he did that, he rushed into the ancient pavilion. Yi Lingling looked at the ancient pavilion, which was covered in formations and restrictions. Inside, she could hear the faint sounds of fighting. She swung her sword. Boom. To her surprise, she was unable to break the formations. Frowning, she took out a small hammer, and hurled it at the ancient pavilion. Once the small hammer left her hand, it grew to the size of a small mountain, and started to crackle with lightning power. When it hit the ancient pavilion, it shattered the formations and restrictions. Putting away the hammer, she strolled inside. In the ancient pavilion, there were a few corpses lying on the ground. There were 2 severely injured people as well, and the Pavilion Master was busy operating a certain formation in the pavilion. He turned around in shock. How had she broken the formation so quickly? Yi Lingling took one step forward at a time, her killing intent was palpable. She said coldly, "The Heavenly Pavilion ranking lists have caused countless disasters. After today, the Heavenly Pavilion will no longer exist." The Pavilion Master looked at Yi Lingling coldly and said, "Do you really think that this is the true Heavenly Pavilion? Do you think that this remote place is the actual world? I'm just a Pavilion Master at the bottom rungs of the Heavenly Pavilion. You're seeking your own death by destroying this place's Heavenly Pavilion." Yi Lingling looked at him silently. So what? She already knew that this place was just a remote corner of the world. Apparently, the Heavenly Pavilion here was only a small branch of the larger organization, which was out of her expectations. Even so, she still wanted to destroy it. Thus, she swung her sword. The Pavilion Master's expression changed drastically, and the jade tablet in his hand lit up as he tried to block this attack. At the same time, a ray of light shot out of the jade tablet and entered Yi Lingling's body. Yi Lingling was shocked. She was unable to avoid or resist the light. Shua. In the end, the jade tablet failed to block the attack, and the Pavilion Master was slain. The jade tablet fell to the ground. Yi Lingling waved her hand and the jade tablet appeared in her hand. 742 The Heavenly Pavilion Part 2. Was this jade tablet the legendary Heaven Glimpse board? Yi Lingling quickly examined her body, but she could not find where the ray of light that entered her body was. As such, she decided to leave the matter to her master. The jade tablet seemed to have dimmed a lot after shooting out the ray of light. There did not seem to be anything special about it, so she put it away and looked at the 2 injured people. Exclamation mark! One of them was the current king of the Great Victory Empire, while the other one was Gen King. If she had not arrived in time, they would have died at the hands of the Pavilion Master. "Thank you for saving my life, Miss Yi," the king said gratefully. Even though he was the king of the empire, he still had to bow his head in front of a powerful expert like Yi Lingling who had single-handedly destroyed the mysterious and untouchable Heavenly Pavilion. Yi Lingling looked at him coldly, and then turned around and left. Since the imperial family had not made a move, she decided to spare them. The moment she stepped out of the pavilion, Yi Lingling suddenly stopped in her tracks. Since this world has been unified, the Great Victory Empire should maintain order and protect the peace. It should protect innocent cultivators and punish the evil ones. Otherwise, what's the point of establishing an empire? just to monopolize the resources of this world. The king was stunned. He immediately said solemnly, Miss Yi, don't worry. Since the Great Victory Empire has unified the world, we will definitely maintain law and order. Previously, although we unified the world, we were powerless to act against the Heavenly Pavilion, as well as the secret collusion of various factions. However, Miss Yi has uprooted all of these factions, and solved the problem for us. We will definitely use this opportunity well to create a peaceful and lawful society. I hope you can keep your word, Yi Lingling said as she strode forward. You should know what to do with Wan Jia. The king was overjoyed. Miss Yi, don't worry. I'll definitely make Wan Jia regret what he has done and suffer the consequences. After this matter, the imperial family became the undisputed strongest faction in the world, and no one dared to stand in their way. Their choice not to intervene in the battle back then proved to be a wise choice. Had they given in to their greed, the Great Victory Empire would likely have been destroyed. Chu Zan was not worried about Yi Lingling's revenge. Even if everyone in the Great Victory Empire attacked her together, they would not be able to hurt her. The clothes she was wearing were extraordinary. It was just that Yi Lingling was ignorant of this fact. Besides, she also had plenty of defensive treasures. Lai Tian treated her as his personal disciple and had given her many treasures. Anything received from a former Dao creation realm expert would be extraordinary. Your disciple, Yi Lingling, has successfully taken revenge and changed the situation in this section. You have been rewarded with 10,000 years worth of cultivation. Chu Zan sat on the chair and drank some tea. The system's reward had arrived, and Chu Zan's strength had increased again, though it would still take quite some time before he broke through to the Dao Supreme Realm. I wonder how little Yi El is doing, Lai Tian floated over and said. Chu Zan could not be bothered to respond. There shouldn't be any accidents, right? There won't be any changes to the surveillance item you mentioned, right? Lai Tian nagged Ho. It was as if Yi Lingling was his daughter. Chu Zan was left speechless by this worried, nagging parent wannabe. Don't worry, what could have possibly happened? There are no real experts here. In order to avoid being detected by experts, Chu Zan did not allow Lai Tian to use his spiritual sense in this remote section. Therefore, Lai Tian could only hold it in, and flew away after rambling on a little more. 3 days later, Yi Lingling returned. It seemed that she was in a hurry as well, as she was uneasy about that ray of light that she could not trace. When Yi Lingling returned, Lai Tian appeared. Lai Tian frowned when he saw Yi Lingling. Master, I'm back. Yi Lingling rushed into the courtyard. After taking her revenge, she felt much more relaxed. His mind was clear, and she had regained her lively attitude. Lai Tian circled around her and glared at her. In an instant, a ray of light flew out of Yi Lingling's body. Seeing this, Yi Lingling, who was about to tell Chu Zan about this matter, was stunned. The ray of light was a small rune that had a special aura. Chu Zan squinted his eyes. This rune was just a small trick left behind by a Daoyuan realm cultivator. It was a type of position and information tracing tool. Some forces would often leave similar runes on their disciples. If the disciple died, they would find the murderer and take revenge for the disciple by tracking the rune. Since the rune had appeared from Yi Lingling's body, it was obvious that something had happened. It seemed that the Heavenly Pavilion was a branch of some force from the Heavenly Sun world. Lai Tian was staring at the rune. Master, Yi Lingling took out the jade tablet and said, while I was destroying the Heavenly Pavilion, there was an accident. She then explained what had happened during the trip. It's only a small matter, Chu Zan said. Chu Zan's eyes glowed. After making sure that there were no special marks on Yi Lingling's body, he said casually, this is a desolate place. Even if the Heavenly Pavilion had truly powerful experts within their ranks, they would not dispatch such experts to this place. Moreover, the Heavenly Pavilion might not be that strong. Yi Lingling heaved a sigh of relief. She was worried that she would offend a powerful force and implicate her master. Old man, what did you see? Chu Zan picked up the dim jade tablet and glanced at it. He then threw it on the table. Lai Tian had been looking at the rune. This rune reminds me of a certain power, Lai Tian muttered. Oh, tell me. Chu Zan was interested. A force that could attract Lai Tian's attention was definitely not weak. Lai Tian, at his peak, was an early-stage Dao creation realm expert. The Wushan Pavilion is said to have been created by a Dao Supreme realm expert who possesses the Dao Supreme artifact, the Wushan Monument, which can monitor the origin, strength, and other powerful abilities of living beings. It's said that it can even monitor the Great Tao, and only those who have reached the Tao Supreme Realm can avoid its surveillance. It's extremely powerful. Lai Tian's expression was grave as he continued, the Wushan Pavilion used to have branches all over the heavenly sun world. Each branch had a replica of the Wushan monument. Whoever destroys a branch of the Wushan Pavilion will be tracked by runes and hunted down by the Wushan Pavilion. Chu Zan raised his eyebrows. This Wushan Pavilion sounded quite domineering. After hearing this, Yi Lingling started to feel uneasy. It seemed that she had caused a big problem. This rune must have been inherited from the Wushan Pavilion, but it's incomplete. Lai Tian shook his head and destroyed the rune. He looked at the jade tablet on the table and said, this is also a replica of the Wushan monument, but it's a bad one that can't even remotely compare to the normal replicas. This so-called heavenly pavilion must have obtained some remnants of the inheritance of the Wushan Pavilion. Chu Zan raised an eyebrow. Wushan Pavilion was destroyed. Lai Tian had made it sound so powerful, but it had disappeared. Lai Tian sighed. Back then, the Wushan Pavilion was also involved in the great battle. Although I did not witness the battle, I heard that the founder of the Wushan Pavilion took the Wushan monument to the battle. In the end, the Wushan monument was broken and he died. In the conflicts that followed, the Wushan Pavilion was completely destroyed. Since the Wushan Pavilion had been destroyed, only part of its inheritance had survived. At most, this heavenly pavilion would only have a Tao Creator Realm expert, if even that. That's pretty much it. They obtained the remnants of the inheritance, and are far inferior to the actual Wushan Pavilion. He looked at Yi Lingling and said, Little Yi, they are just an ant-like force. Destroying it means nothing. Don't worry. Really? Yi Lingling was still a little worried. Chu Zan smiled. Don't worry. I can easily handle something like this. Hearing this, Yi Lingling was completely relieved. As long as it was not a Tao Supreme Realm expert. Chu Zan was not afraid. After Yi Lingling returned from her revenge, she became much more lively and optimistic. Life returned to how it was before. Chu Zan would occasionally go to the garden and walk his cat, living an ordinary and leisurely life. Lai Tian continued his secluded cultivation. He could not stand living such a normal life. If he did not know how extraordinary Chu Zan was, he would have even suspected that the latter was an ordinary person. 10 years later, Yi Lingling broke through to the heaven realm. When a cultivator in the heavenly sun world broke through to the heaven realm, they would also face a tribulation and they had to overcome it. When Yi Lingling broke through to the heaven realm, there were flames and lightning bolts in the sky. However, in the end, they did not strike her. It could not even detect Yi Lingling's presence. After Yi Lingling broke through to the heaven realm, she continued to cultivate and did not leave the valley. Chu Zan was not in a hurry. When she reached the Tao realm, Yi Lingling would need to go out and gain experience to solidify her cultivation foundation and obtain insights to break through. No matter how monstrous her talent was, she could not always rely on secluded cultivation. The further one progressed, the slower one's cultivation speed would be. Soon, 100 years had passed. Yi Lingling was already at the peak of the divine realm. She was only one step away from the Tao realm. However, as the great Tao was not visible here, Yi Lingling could not break through to the Tao state. Chu Zan and Lai Tian could actually help Yi Lingling comprehend the great Tao. However, neither of them did that. Yi Lingling had to walk her own path, especially when it came to the great Tao. He could only give her pointers and preach the Tao to her, but he could not help her comprehend the great Tao directly. If that happened, Yi Lingling would comprehend his Tao instead of finding her own, and would limit her cultivation in the future to the Tao creation realm. Yi Lingling then left the valley again. The current Great Victory Empire was different from the past. It became more and more powerful. Moreover, there was a semblance of law and order now. However, the heavenly pavilion had been rebuilt and was once again high and mighty. The king of the Great Victory Empire was also helpless about this. Yi Lingling had already disappeared. Her enemy, Wan Jia, had long since suffered and died in regret. Naturally, he would not appear again. The king could only compromise and allow the heavenly pavilion to do their thing. Thankfully, the rest of the forces were under the jurisdiction of the imperial family. The heavenly pavilion was the same as always. They did not interfere with worldly affairs or conflicts between forces. The 3 ranking lists that had disappeared for a short time had only reappeared. If there were no accidents, even if the Great Victory Empire established law and order, there would still be people on the 100 Flowers ranking list who would suffer. On this day, a beautiful figure appeared in the imperial city. No one had noticed her. Even the Heavenly Pavilion's Heaven Glimpse Board, which monitored the world, did not notice the woman's arrival. As usual, many cultivators gathered around the stone monument and talked about the 3 ranking lists. The older cultivators talked about the battle more than 100 years ago, when the 3 ranking lists and the Heavenly Pavilion were destroyed. Now that the Heavenly Pavilion had been rebuilt, that person had not appeared again. Many people thought that Yi Lingling had been killed by the Heavenly Pavilion. Yi Lingling looked at the stone monument and the 3 ranking lists. She heard the cultivators discussing that a beauty on the 100 flowers ranking had been separated from her lover and became the plaything of a young master from a noble family. She was even forced to serve some important guests. There were even some cultivators who were excited by this, saying that they wanted to curry favor with the young master of the noble family in order to obtain the opportunity to have a taste of the beauty from the 100 flowers ranking list. A sword beam appeared, and the stone monument instantly turned into fine powder. Yi Lingling's face was filled with anger as she looked at the building not far away. Since her master and senior Lai Tian both said that the Heavenly Pavilion was not worth mentioning, she naturally did not have to worry about provoking the Heavenly Pavilion. The surrounding cultivators were all shocked. Who dared to destroy the stone monument and antagonize the Heavenly Pavilion? Some of the older cultivators could not help but recall what happened 100 years ago. Their bodies were trembling. The legendary woman had returned. As expected, a beautiful figure appeared in front of the Heavenly Pavilion. At this moment, a figure appeared in front of the Heavenly Pavilion. One of them was an old man who was a 5th-level Supreme Realm cultivator. He looked at Yi Lingling coldly with a jade tablet in his hand. "You're the one who destroyed the Heavenly Pavilion back then?" Yi Lingling stared at him coldly and said, "The Heavenly Pavilion is a scourge. Today, it will be destroyed again." She swung her sword ruthlessly. The old man's expression changed drastically. He stood no chance whatsoever. Boom! The Heavenly Pavilion shattered instantly. The jade tablet flashed with a ray of light that shot toward Yi Lingling. The jade tablet shot out a ray of light that headed straight for Yi Lingling. After the previous incident, Chu Zan and Lai Tian had made some preparations for this, and her clothes now had the ability to block the runes. Therefore, when the ray of light appeared, the Dao aura infused into the clothes were activated, and the ray of light disappeared. After Yi Lingling killed the new pavilion master, she also broke the jade tablet. She did not leave immediately, but began to set up restrictions and formations where the Heavenly Pavilion once stood, as well as around it. Unless a Dao realm cultivator came, anyone the Heavenly Pavilion sent to re-establish it would be killed by these formations and restrictions. Furthermore, it was unlikely that the Heavenly Pavilion would send Dao realm and above cultivators to such a desolate place. After finishing all this, Yi Lingling left the Heavenly Pavilion, only to find the king of the Great Victory Empire waiting for her respectfully. "Greetings, Senior." After this incident, he felt that Yi Lingling was truly unfathomable. She had not shown herself for more than 100 years, so he had believed her to be dead. However, the moment she showed up again, she immediately destroyed the Heavenly Pavilion again. The mountain that had been weighing the imperial family down had been crushed once again. "I've set up some formations and restrictions here," Yi Lingling said. She did not want random people to be killed by these formations, so she told him about it. In any case, the king had listened to her and established law and order in the empire to a certain extent. At least compared to a century ago, the lives of weaker cultivators were slightly better. "Got it, Senior." The king immediately took note of this and understood her intentions. Yi Lingling did not stick around and left immediately. Over the next few years, Yi Lingling traveled around this desolate corner of the Heavenly Sun world. When she returned to the valley, she was already on the verge of reaching the Dao realm. "It's time to leave this place," Chu Zan looked at Yi Lingling and said. "Master." Chu Zan interrupted her, "I've already taught you what I should. You have to walk your own path in the future. Only by walking your own path can you reach my current level." Yi Lingling took a deep breath and said, "I understand, Master. Before you leave, I will give you a few words of advice. Be careful in everything you do. Unless it's a life or death situation, don't reveal your full strength. Always maintain some hidden trump cards. People's hearts are sinister, so you must be wary of others. The more modest someone is on the surface, the more likely they are scum." Chu Zan solemnly warned her of many things. "Yes, Master, I understand." Lai Tian sighed. His eyes were also filled with reluctance. "Little Yi, I'll give you some advice and information too." He was an expert of the Heavenly Sun world, and he had fought his way up back then. Therefore, His understanding of the heavenly sun world was greater than Chuzan's. Next, Lai Tian imparted some of his experiences in the heavenly sun world, and Su Shaner also gave her some helpful tips. In the end, Yi Lingling kowtowed 3 times to Chuzan respectfully and left with red eyes. With her current strength, it was not difficult for her to pass through the barrier between sections. After leaving this place and passing through a barrier, she entered a different section. Although the upper limit of this section was a little higher, the divine realm was the peak here, so she had to continue her journey. After Yi Lingling left, Lai Tian moped around for a few days before falling into a state of deep sleep. Chuzan, on the other hand, was looking forward to when Yi Lingling would be able to trigger the system's rewards again. Soon, another 1,000 years passed. Chuzan's strength had increased greatly, and he even had a few more Tao Supreme divine weapons. The second millennium's milestone reward was a Tao Supreme ruler's divine artifact. Over the past 1,000 years, Lai Tian had only woken up twice, and had stayed awake very briefly both times. The first time was 500 years ago, when Yi Lingling came back. Chuzan was a little regretful that Yi Lingling had yet to trigger the system's rewards. Perhaps it was because she was too weak, or perhaps it was because nothing major happened around her yet. Yi Lingling had already reached the Daoyuan realm. Her unique constitution had allowed her cultivation to progress rapidly. Incidentally, the heavenly pavilion had set up branches in the sections she had visited. Since she was at odds with them, she often came into conflict with them, and had also been targeted by the experts of the heavenly pavilion. Over the past 1,000 years, the Great Victory Empire had become stronger and stronger. The heavenly pavilion had sent more people to set up a branch, but they all died to the formations and restrictions. In the end, they gave up. This place was too remote and not worth sending true experts over. There was no need to send people to their deaths. There were some geniuses from the Great Victory Empire, but none of them caught Chuzan's eye, so he did not take them as his disciples. Chuzan sat on a chair, eating Su Shaner's desserts and drinking tea, leisurely. He was already used to such a life. Even after 1,000 years, he did not find it boring. He would just have to accept another disciple at some point. The more talented the disciple was, the higher the chances of the disciple triggering the system's rewards. Suddenly, Chuzan raised his head and looked into the distance. Boom! Someone had passed through the energy barrier that separated this place from the outside world, and a sorry figure flew toward the valley. It was a young man covered in blood. He was severely injured. This young man was a 3rd-level heaven realm cultivator. When he had been about to reach the sky above the valley, he was already on the verge of collapsing. PFF'd. In the sky above the valley, he spurted out a mouthful of blood and fell unconscious, falling directly into the valley. Another fated person. Chuzan's eyes brightened. Finally, a disciple had come. One could see that the young man's fate energy was like a cloud surrounding him. Furthermore, it seemed to be endless. Chuzan ignored the young man. He would not die anyway. When he woke up, he would naturally find his way to the small courtyard. The young man fell into a medicinal garden, crushing some spiritual plants in the process. The essence of the crushed spiritual herbs and fruits seeped into the young man's body, healing his injuries and also strengthening him. Shui Ping felt his entire body heating up, as if he suddenly had an endless amount of energy. He felt that his body could no longer bear it, and it was as if he was about to explode from the tremendous amount of energy. He suddenly sat up, and looked around, completely stunned. Not only had his heavy injuries been healed, but he had also broken through a minor realm. What was even more terrifying was that there was a huge amount of spiritual energy in his body. He could not be bothered to check where he was, and hurriedly activated his cultivation technique to refine the spiritual energy in his body. Had he woken up a little later, he would have exploded. As he refined the spiritual energy, he began to break through again. Within a short while, he broke through to the 5th level of Heaven Realm. This was a level that Shui Ping had never even dared to think about before. Furthermore, there was still plenty of spiritual energy remaining in his body. At this moment, Shui Ping only hated the fact that his cultivation technique was not powerful enough, which was slowing down the speed at which he refined the spiritual energy. Gritting his teeth, he frantically pushed his cultivation technique to its limits. A day later, he had reached the 7th level Heaven Realm. However, Shui Ping was no longer excited. He was afraid. The spiritual energy in his body was still accumulating at a terrifying rate, and his body felt like it was expanding. Fortunately, after breaking through to the 7th level of the heaven realm, his body was no longer in danger of exploding. He continued to cultivate. Another day passed, and he broke through to the 8th level of heaven realm. In such a short time, his strength had soared, but Shui Ping was not happy. He could feel that his cultivation foundation was weak after this series of breakthroughs, and his combat strength was not on par with an actual 8th level heaven realm cultivator. He only had the combat strength of an ordinary 5th level heaven realm cultivator. Next, he would need to spend some time to solidify his cultivation foundation and master his newfound strength. He finally had the time to observe his surroundings. Once he did, he was utterly shocked. Had he come to a treasured land? As far as his eye could see, there were heavenly treasures and resources. The leaves of each spiritual plant exuded Dao aura. Even the Daoyuan realm experts would be envious of his discovery. Shui Ping's breathing grew heavy. He then looked down at the spiritual fruits and herbs he had smashed. The essence had seeped into his body, which was what had allowed him to break through so quickly. What a great opportunity! Shui Ping was so excited that he could hardly calm himself down. With so many heavenly treasures, he would have no problem reaching the Daoyuan realm. Just you wait. Shui Ping's expression then transformed into one of hatred. Sooner or later, he would regain his lost dignity. Suddenly, he looked at the treasures around him, and his heart skipped a beat. These spiritual plants were planted by someone. This was someone's medicinal garden. Could it be a large sect? How could a sect that could cultivate such a precious medicinal garden be ordinary? This sect was definitely extremely powerful. Shui Ping started to worry. He had destroyed some of the spiritual plants and absorbed their essence. Once it was discovered, he would have to pay compensation, right? How could he afford it? Would he have to pay with his life? Shui Ping felt that his level of talent was only average, so he was definitely not qualified to become a disciple of a large sect like this. Escape. Shui Ping struggled, but in the end, he gritted his teeth and walked into the valley. It was impossible to escape. He had his sense of dignity too. After passing through an ancient forest, he saw a small courtyard. There were a few ordinary wooden houses. It was not a big sect. Could it be a place where experts lived in seclusion? Shui Ping walked into the courtyard and saw a figure lying on a chair. Junior Shui Ping pays his respects to Senior. Shui Ping bowed respectfully outside the courtyard. There was an accident, and I destroyed Senior's spiritual plants. Come in, Chu Zan said with a yawn. Shui Ping walked into the courtyard nervously. He sneaked a glance at the person on the chair. It was a handsome young man. Of course, he did not think that this person was really a young man. He was probably an old monster who had changed his appearance. Please forgive me, Senior. I'm willing to compensate you for your spiritual plants. Shui Ping felt his hair stand on end as Chu Zan glanced at him. Chu Zan was a little confused. Shui Ping's fate energy was strong, and he looked like a protagonist. However, his level of talent was only above average. However, upon closer inspection, one would discover that there was something special about it. Another special constitution. That did not seem right. What was special about him was his soul. However, his current level of talent was indeed only above average. 8th level of the heaven realm, it was nothing special. Furthermore, he could not even exert that level of strength. Chu Zan was not surprised. After all, he had been nourished by the spiritual fruits and herbs, and his cultivation had risen rapidly. It was normal for him to be a little weak. Shui Ping was not young either. He was over 300 years old. Shui Ping's potential was far worse than Yi Lingling's. At 300 years old, Yi Lingling had already reached the 16th level of the Dao realm. Compared to a genius like Yi Lingling, Shui Ping was no doubt a loser. However, in the Heavenly Sun world, he was considered a mid-level genius. In any case, fate had led him here, so Chu Zan knew that Shui Ping was qualified to become his disciple. He just did not know what those qualifications were. This was the drawback of him not knowing much about the Heavenly Sun world. He had too many blind spots in terms of his knowledge. Helpless, he could only summon Lai Tian. Lai Tian was stunned. He was in a deep sleep, thinking about how to recover, but had been suddenly summoned and whisked away by Chu Zan without a word. While Shui Ping was drowning in his apprehension, he suddenly saw a head flying over. He was so scared that his face turned pale and he staggered 2 steps backward. Lai Tian also noticed Shui Ping and suddenly understood why Chu Zan was looking for him. He circled around Shui Ping, examining the latter closely. Chu Zan raised an eyebrow. Could it be that Lai Tian, this old monster, did not know what kind of special talent Shui Ping had? That would make things quite troublesome. Shui Ping, you're quite special. You have unparalleled talent, but you just haven't realized it yet. Chu Zan took advantage of the gap in Lai Tian's thoughts and said, fate has led you here. As such, are you willing to become my disciple? No matter what, he just had to accept this disciple. Shui Ping was stunned. This senior wanted to take him in as a disciple. Furthermore, he said that he was very talented. After taking a look at the head, Shui Ping knelt down. Disciple Shui Ping greets master. Thump, thump, thump. He forcefully kowtowed 3 times. He was afraid that if he did not acknowledge this senior as his master, he would be destroyed. No matter how he looked at it, that head was terrifying. Su Shaner came out from the wooden house and stood beside Chu Zan. Sir, you're taking in a disciple again. Shui Ping looked at Su Shaner and immediately kowtowed again. Disciple Shui Ping greets master's wife. Su Shaner was startled, but also secretly happy. She casually gave him a divine sword. The corners of Chu Zan's mouth twitched. Shui Ping seemed to be quite good at taking advantage of situations. After giving out the divine sword, Su Shaner corrected, I'm not your master's wife. I'm his maidservant. You can just call me Sister Su. Thank you for the reward, Sister Su. When Shui Ping received the divine sword, his heart filled with shock. It had been worthwhile to call her master's wife. You may rise, Chu Zan said. Shui Ping stood up respectfully. Now that he had become this person's disciple, he was wondering who and what kind of person his master was. Also, there was that strange flying head. Perhaps he was a great devil. Lai Tian's eyes suddenly lit up as he stared at Shui Ping with burning eyes, which caused the latter's hair to stand on end. 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul, Lai Tian exclaimed in shock. Chu Zan raised an eyebrow. Old man, tell Shui Ping what is so special about him. Don't try to make it sound so mysterious. Lai Tian rolled his eyes. This guy did not even know what it was, but he pretended to know everything. After accepting Shui Ping as his disciple, the system presented him with a reward. To Chu Zan's surprise, the system did not reward him with a cultivation technique this time. This also meant that Shui Ping's talent did not require any special cultivation technique. You took Shui Ping in as your disciple. He has a form of supreme talent. You have been rewarded with the Myriad Supreme Record. Chu Zan looked at the reward's description. The Myriad Supreme Record contained the various types of supreme talents and constitutions throughout the eras. In a sense, it made up for Chu Zan's lack of knowledge in this aspect. Chu Zan received his reward and quickly found the Myriad Supreme Record's description of the 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul. The 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul is a special talent, Lai Tian said. It's said that one needs to experience 9 great calamities before they can fully awaken and unleash their talent. Once they unleash their talent, they have the potential to reach the peak of the Tao Supreme Realm. However, if they fail to survive the calamities, they will die. Chu Zan looked at the record's description and realized that it matched what Lai Tian said. The owner of the 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul indeed needed to go through 9 great life and death calamities, and would undergo nirvana after surviving each calamity. If they survived all 9 calamities, they would not suffer any cultivation setbacks before the Tao Creation Realm, and would eventually be capable of reaching the peak of the Tao Supreme Realm. With this kind of special talent, it's destined to be difficult for him to fully unleash his innate talent. After all, if he's not careful, he will die during the great calamities. Fortunately, people with the 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul were blessed by fate, and would not die easily. However, it was also destined that the process of Shui Ping's development would be arduous. Moreover, having a strong fate did not mean that one could not turn misfortune into fortune. It's rumored that there was once a Tao Supreme Realm expert who possessed the 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul. He was the only person known to have passed the 9 great tribulations, though he was from before my era. In my generation, there was an expert who had undergone 7 nirvanas, and was a Tao Creation Realm expert. However, because he had only undergone nirvana 7 times, he was unable to break through to the Tao Supreme Realm. Shui Ping was stunned as he listened. His heart was in turmoil, and he was unable to calm himself down. I actually have an extremely powerful talent. However, he had to go through 9 tribulations and complete 9 nirvanas before he could fully awaken his talent. Furthermore, what was the Tao Creation Realm? What was the Tao Supreme Realm? He only knew about the Saint Tao Realm, and the Saint Tao King Realm. There were rumors of a Holy Tao Realm expert, which was a true peak existence, but the Tao Creation and Tao Supreme Realms. This was completely unheard of. He realized that his knowledge of the world was still too shallow. Could it be that his own master was such a transcendent existence? What a great opportunity! It did not matter whether he was a demon or not. In this world, being strong was the most important thing. Shui Ping's heart was filled with excitement. The 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul's owner indeed needed to go through 9 life and death calamities and undergo 9 nirvanas to fully awaken their talent. However, what was not apparent to everyone was that the owner of the 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul did not have to rely on himself to survive those calamities. In fact, with the protection of an expert, it was possible to complete the 9 nirvanas within a short period of time and successfully awaken their talent. There was a detailed description of this in the Myriad Supreme Record, as well as how to go about it. After Lai Tian finished talking, Chu Zan chimed in, smiling mysteriously. "Old man, you are correct. However, it's actually not difficult to awaken the 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul." Lai Tian shot him a glance. If it was really that easy, why would most cultivators with the 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul be regarded as trash? Because of its special nature, the 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul was only highly regarded once they underwent a certain number of nirvanas. As for those who had not, they were trash, and were treated as such. In history, there had been many cultivators with the 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul who could not undergo nirvana and eventually became ordinary and mediocre existences. There were only 2 or 3 in history who had truly become experts. Lai Tian was confident that Chu Zan's knowledge and vision could not compare to his. Chu Zan's understanding of the Heavenly Sun world, as well as the various unique talents this world had, was far too lacking. After all, he had once been a Tao creation realm expert and was a native of the Heavenly Sun world. How could Chu Zan, a guy who came from the chaos, compare to him in terms of knowledge of the Heavenly Sun world? In terms of knowledge of the chaos, Lai Tian knew that he was inferior to Chu Zan. However, he would not concede to Chu Zan on his home turf. "If I'm not wrong, you've encountered a life and death crisis and survived," Lai Tian looked at Shui Ping and said. "Given your current level of talent, I would hazard that you have probably undergone nirvana twice or thrice." Shui Ping was shocked. Now that he thought about it closely, after he encountered a life and death crisis, he realized that his cultivation speed had increased. Even his understanding of cultivation techniques improved. Previously, he had attributed it to enlightenment from his near-death experiences, but now it seemed that it had something to do with this 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul thing. "I only remember experiencing a life and death crisis once prior to this one. However, I once heard from my elders that I almost died when I was young, but I managed to survive in the end," he said as he suddenly recalled something. 3 times, including this time, Chu Zan said lightly. Shui Ping nodded his head. He was worried. He still needed to experience 6 more life and death calamities before he could fully awaken his talent. 6 times. There was no way he could guarantee that he would survive every time. "It's not difficult to awaken the 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul," Chu Zan said. "Since you are my disciple, I will naturally help you awaken your talent." "Many thanks, Master." Shui Ping was extremely excited. "How are you going to help him awaken?" Lai Tian asked doubtfully. Chu Zan laughed. "Life and death calamities. I'll just create them for him." If it was that easy, that 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul expert back then wouldn't have been abandoned by his family, Lai Tian sneered. Chu Zan glanced at him. This guy seemed very unconvinced. Did he think that just because he was a native expert of the Heavenly Sun world, he knew more about talents than him? Of course, that was true before he received the Myriad Supreme Record, but oh well. "Old man, how about a bet?" Lai Tian raised his eyebrows and asked, "What are we betting on?" "I will help him awaken his 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul. If I succeed, you will be my servant." Chu Zan thought for a moment. Lai Tian's brows twitched. Although he was in Chu Zan's hands, he was not Chu Zan's old servant yet. After hesitating for a moment, Chu Zan said, "I've changed my mind. A servant is too pitiful. You're a famous expert, after all. How about a subordinate, the kind that is super loyal and obedient?" The corners of Lai Tian's mouth twitched. "I think you should just start a sect. Since you've already taken in a disciple, I'll be your sect's guardian or elder." Chu Zan felt that it made sense. He had already taken in many personal disciples and in-name disciples. He nodded. "Then let's call it the Zan Gate sect. It sounds authentic and awesome." "Hoo, I've got my own sect now." Lai Tian nodded. "Sure, if I lose, I'll be your subordinate. I'll be a guardian, elder, or whatever. But if I win, what can you give me?" Quote. As for removing the control mark on his divine soul, Lai Tian did not care much about that. He was only left with his head, and there was almost no hope of recovery, so there was no need to fret about such things. If I lose, I'll help you recover your physical body, and then help you recover your strength, Chu Zan said lightly. You can do it. Lai Tian's eyes lit up. Not yet, but I'll be able to in the future. I'll be able to do it within 100,000 years, Chu Zan said after a moment of silence. Lai Tian was secretly shocked. This feat would likely require the strength of a Tao Supreme Realm expert, and a strong one at that. The Tao he had created had completely collapsed and disappeared. Creating a second new Tao was far more difficult than the first one. Moreover, his Tao had been destroyed by a Tao Supreme Realm expert, so there were still traces of the Tao Supreme Realm expert's power hindering his recovery, and that power would also interfere with the creation of a new Tao. Recovering his strength was much more difficult than recovering his physical body. Was Chu Zan so confident that he would be able to break through to the Tao Supreme Realm within 100,000 years? Or even the Tao Supreme Ruler Realm? It was simply unimaginable. Alright, let's bet, Lai Tian gritted his teeth and said. He had nothing to lose anyway. Then it's settled. Chu Zan chuckled. This bet would just make Lai Tian's status as his subordinate official. He looked at Shui Ping and asked, do you want to awaken your talent? The process will definitely be painful. After all, you'll have to go through 6 near-death experiences. I will do it personally, but will also give you the spiritual medicine to recover after each round. Although your life will not be in danger from my perspective, you will have to experience inhuman pain and suffering in the process. From your end, you will truly feel like dying. Lai Tian laughed. I knew it. If you want to use this method, it definitely won't work. If it was so easy to awaken this talent, it would not be called trash. Chu Zan smiled and did not respond. Someone must have tried this before. However, the reason why they failed was that the owner of the 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul did not truly feel like he had experienced a life or death calamity, and the one executing it had not gone far enough. Furthermore, it would be difficult to pull this off on a 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul cultivator who had not experienced enough life or death calamities. They would simply faint from the pain or give up, thus failing to undergo nirvana. Shui Ping had gone through many hardships and life and death situations. His willpower was strong, so it would not be a problem for him to survive this experience. Shui Ping gritted his teeth and said, Master, I choose to awaken my talent. I can do it. He recalled his own life experiences. What was a mere pain in comparison? Alright, I'll believe in you then. Chu Zan waved his hand, and a bunch of priceless spiritual herbs appeared beside Shui Ping. This should be enough for you to recover 6 times. Shui Ping's eyes lit up as he looked at them. They were all top-grade heavenly treasures. Even if he did not awaken the 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul, with his current talent and these heavenly treasures, he should be able to break through to the divine realm. However, that would be what his previous self would have chosen. Now, he knew about the 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul, and wanted nothing more than to awaken to his full potential. He wanted to awaken his talent and take back the dignity that belonged to him. He took a deep breath and said, Master, I'm ready. Okay, let's start. After Chu Zan spoke, he acted, and Shui Ping immediately screamed in pain. His physical body suddenly collapsed. Even his divine soul was suffering from the destructive power that Chu Zan was using. It was as if he was on the very edge of death, and would die at any moment. Shui Ping screamed, and his face was contorted in pain. It was 100 times more painful than any of his previous injuries. He almost felt like his life was flashing before his eyes. The pain overwhelmed his consciousness, and he almost forgot what he was going to do. Lai Tian looked on. He frowned. Something was wrong with Shui Ping. Why did it feel like he was enduring pain that far exceeded what he should feel given the power that Chu Zan was using? Chu Zan explained, actually, it's possible to awaken the 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul with this method. However, it will cause the 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul cultivator an extreme amount of pain. Those who don't have strong willpower will lose consciousness from the pain. Naturally, they will fail their nirvana if they do so. Lai Tian frowned and asked, why is this so? Chu Zan smiled and said mysteriously, naturally, this is due to a restriction of the transcendent laws. Lai Tian's heart trembled as he looked at Chu Zan in a daze. Because of the limitations of the transcendent laws, the level of pain would be increased by 100 times when others assisted in the nirvana process. In that case, only those with the strongest willpower would be able to succeed. Lai Tian was shocked. He had once been a Tao creation realm expert, but he had never realized the restrictions of transcendent laws. The other Tao creation realm experts of the Heavenly Sun world had probably not realized this problem either. Perhaps the Tao Supreme realm experts did, but in their eyes, those who did not experience the calamities were not worth paying attention to, which was why the truth was not spread. Or was there some other reason behind this? Furthermore, how did Chu Zan find out? Lai Tian felt that Chu Zan was becoming more and more unfathomable. In fact, Chu Zan did not mention one point. Since Shui Ping needed to undergo nirvana 6 times, the pain he suffered would continue to stack, and each time, it would be 100 times more painful than the previous time. This was also one of the restrictions of the transcendent rules. If he wanted others to help him in his awakening, he had to have sufficient willpower to withstand the pain. Only in this way could he be judged worthy of the 9 nirvana heavenly soul talent. In fact, the 9 life or death calamities were also to temper one's willpower. Do you think he can withstand it? Lai Tian looked at Shui Ping. There's a saying that only through suffering can one rise above others. If he can't even withstand this little bit of suffering, how can he become a peerless expert? Who can become a Tao Supreme expert just by living a carefree life? Lai Tian nodded. Chu Zan's words made sense. Lai Tian himself had also gone through many hardships, fought many battles, and overcome countless crises before reaching the Tao creation realm. Even the descendants and disciples of Tao Supreme realm experts could not do so. Then, Lai Tian suddenly turned and stared at Chu Zan. Was he not the best example of someone becoming stronger while living a carefree life? I've never seen him cultivate. How does he keep getting stronger, and even more knowledgeable about the Heavenly Sun world? It was really strange. Shui Ping had already started to absorb the spiritual herbs to recover. He no longer screamed, but gritted his teeth and endured the pain. Gradually, the injuries to his soul recovered and his body began to regrow itself. Lai Tian's eyes flashed. Shui Ping's level of talent had increased. He had really undergone nirvana. This meant that this method worked. Shui Ping eventually recovered, panting heavily. His heart was still gripped by fear. He had almost failed to endure the pain. However, when he examined his body's condition, he could not contain his excitement. His cultivation foundation, which had been unstable due to his rapid breakthroughs, had actually stabilized. Moreover, he could clearly feel that there was something different about his body. Chu Zan did not immediately start the next round. Instead, he said, "You still have 5 more life or death calamities to experience, and each one will be more painful than the last. Do you want to continue? If you can't endure it, it's very likely that you'll die. Even if I save your life, you'll be reduced to a useless piece of trash, and you'll never be able to surpass the heaven realm in your lifetime. Teacher, I choose to continue." Shui Ping gritted his teeth and said, "If I really can't endure it, you don't have to save my life, master. Just let this useless disciple pass away instead." Shui Ping's face was filled with determination. "I have never admitted defeat in my life. I have never lowered my head. I swear that I will regain my dignity. I will let those who have humiliated and trampled on me look down on me ever again. Even if I might die, I want to try." Chu Zan was silent. Shui Ping's determination made both him and Lai Tian see him in a different light. "All right, then," Chu Zan nodded. "Take it easy for now. There's no need to rush things." With a wave of his hand, spiritual liquid entered Shui Ping's body, restoring him to his peak condition. "There's no need to slow down, master, please continue," Shui Ping said with a determined expression. Chu Zan nodded, and then, PFF'd, Shui Ping's physical body exploded once again, and even his divine soul was being eroded by the destructive power. However, this time, Shui Ping did not scream. Even though his face was twisted in pain, he did not let out a squeak. His gaze remained bright and filled with an unyielding will. This was his only chance to obtain this great opportunity. A chance to take back the dignity that belonged to him. A chance to make the people who had once humiliated him kneel before him. He had to seize this opportunity. Even if he was cut into 1,000 pieces and had to suffer the pain of his divine soul being refined, he could not afford to give up. With this conviction, Shui Ping endured the pain, and then he began to absorb the spiritual herbs to recover. Lai Tian sighed as he observed this. How much humiliation and suffering had Shui Ping suffered? Was his desire for revenge strengthening his willpower? If he could hold until his talent was fully awakened, he would definitely soar to the sky in the future and become a Tao Supreme Realm expert. Lai Tian was actually feeling rather envious. The Tao Supreme Realm was something he had only dreamed of at his peak. The legendary Tao Supreme Ruler Realm was an even more distant fantasy. The Tao Supreme Ruler Realm was regarded as the end of the path of cultivation, and it was not exactly wrong. At least, so far, there had been no one who had truly surpassed the Tao Supreme Ruler Realm. Legends had it that many Tao Supreme Rulers left the Heavenly Sun world and entered the Void region in order to seek out opportunities to break through. However, no news of them had even returned. Shui Ping's second nirvana was a success. His expression became more and more determined. His willpower had also become stronger. Master, continue. Chu Zan raised an eyebrow. This guy seemed to be a glutton for punishment. However, with his strong willpower, it seemed certain that he would become a powerful expert in the future. The third round began. Shui Ping also survived the following rounds, and at this moment, Shui Ping's divine soul was emitting a divine light, which was surrounded by an unfathomable aura. It seemed to be hiding the might of the heavens. The 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul had completely awakened. After awakening the 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul, Shui Ping's cultivation rose to the first level of the divine realm. This was only to be expected, as every time he underwent nirvana, he would absorb the medicinal power of a lot of heavenly treasures. Although much of it was consumed to restore his body, the remainder was not a small amount, and fueled his breakthrough to the divine realm. Shui Ping knelt on the ground with a thud. Thank you, Master, for your kindness. Without Chu Zan, he would have never achieved this. He could sense the transformation that his body and divine soul had undergone, and felt immense gratitude and excitement. You may rise. Chu Zan remained seated on the chair while Su Shaner massaged his shoulders. I admit defeat. From now on, I'm a member of the Zan Gate sect, Lai Tian sighed. Chu Zan glanced at him and said, it isn't necessarily a bad thing, you know. Lai Tian smiled. Indeed, he had gained an opportunity. Whether he became a guardian or an elder of the sect, Chu Zan would help him recover his strength. Chu Zan had accepted Lai Tian as he needed someone to help him deal with things outside the valley, since he himself could not leave it. Naturally, as a veteran expert of the Heavenly Sun world, Lai Tian was a better fit for this role than his 2 Heavenly Sun world disciples. Furthermore, as a representative of the Zan Gate sect, he had to uphold the prestige of the sect. Therefore, it was unacceptable for him to be weak. Of course, for the time being, Chu Zan did not need Lai Tian to do anything for him. He was preparing for the future. If Ding Yu and his other disciples transcended the chaos and entered the Heavenly Sun world, they would need an expert to receive them and guide them to Chu Zan's location. All of this would be made easier if Lai Tian recovered to his peak strength. Chu Zan looked at Shui Ping and said, since you have accepted me as your master, from today onward, you are the 11th disciple of the Zan Gate sect. Shui Ping was stunned. 11th. There were 10 senior brothers and sisters before him. I will teach you the sect's techniques now. You must work hard in your cultivation and are not allowed to slack off. Yes, Master. Chu Zan pondered for a moment, and then raised his hand and transmitted a technique into Shui Ping's mind. This was a cultivation technique that the system had rewarded him with. It was suitable for Shui Ping's 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul, and could stimulate his talent and display the vast power of the heavens. Shui Ping immediately entered a state of enlightenment after he received it. The more he read through it, the more excited he became. This cultivation technique was too profound and powerful, and beyond his wildest imagination. Even legendary Holy Tao cultivation techniques were probably not as good as this one. Thank you, Master, for bestowing upon me this cultivation technique. Shui Ping knelt down respectfully once again. The Zan Gate sect doesn't have many rules. You cannot kill fellow sect members, cannot kill innocent people, and cannot use your strength to bully the weak. That's all, Chu Zan said seriously. Don't worry, Master. I won't break the sect rules or disobey you, Shui Ping said solemnly. That's good. Chu Zan nodded. Next, he began to teach Shui Ping the standard sect techniques, including the movement, escape, aura concealment and disguise techniques. After Shui Ping mastered those, Chu Zan taught him the sword Dao, as well as various other techniques. When he was done, he allowed Shui Ping to cultivate on his own. With a new disciple around, the valley was a little more lively. Lai Tian also halted his secluded cultivation, and began to guide Shui Ping as the latter cultivated, and also passed on some of his secret techniques to him. In the blink of an eye, 100 years had passed, and Shui Ping had already reached the 15th level of the Tao realm. The power of the 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul was clearly displayed here, as he also mastered a large number of cultivation techniques easily. Apart from cultivating, he would pay his respects to Chu Zan every day, take care of trivial matters in the valley, and help Chuzan plant all kinds of spiritual herbs and fruits. He believed that his master's cultivation realm was too high, and that his master's every move contained the principles of the great Tao. It might look like his master was planting spiritual herbs like an ordinary farmer, but in reality, his master was cultivating some incredible technique, or so he thought. Shui Ping also discovered that the cat that Su Shan'er often carried in her arms was actually extremely powerful, and was not as cute and obedient as it seemed. There was also the mighty sky-shaking rock, which possessed unfathomable strength. In the ancient forest, there was actually a white tiger divine beast as well. He also found 3 other divine beasts in the valley. All of this filled him with awe and veneration toward his master. The Zon Gate sect was truly extraordinary. He did not know how strong his 10 senior brothers and sisters were, but he reckoned that they were not weak. Anyone taught by a peerless expert like Chuzan could never be weak. After these 100 years had passed, Shui Ping decided to leave and make a name for himself. It was time for him to return and regain his dignity. He was a 400-year-old 15th level Tao realm cultivator. In the Heavenly Sun world, he was considered a top-tier genius. Furthermore, Shui Ping was confident that he would be able to reach the Daoyuan realm in less than 200 years. Chuzan sat on the chair and glanced at Shui Ping, who was planting spiritual herbs. It was obvious that this kid was itching to leave on an adventure. This disciple of his was not someone who could endure boredom. Moreover, he had been suppressing his anger and wanted revenge. Now that he was strong enough, he was finding it hard to contain himself. 9 Nirvana Heavenly Soul cultivators were born for a life of adventure and challenge anyway, so it was time to release him into the world. Perhaps, he would be able to trigger the system's reward. It had been so many years, yet Yi Lingling had not triggered the system's reward, which made Chuzan rather helpless. Suddenly, your disciple, Yi Lingling, killed a Saint Tao King in an ancient ruin and obtained a fragment of the Wushan monument, shocking the world. You have been rewarded with 10,000 years worth of cultivation. Suddenly, the system's reward came. Chuzan was stunned. Yi Lingling killed a Saint Tao King. The 9 levels of the Saint Tao King realm were equivalent to the first through 9 extreme Daoyuan realm. Yi Lingling was indeed a domineering figure, and seemed to be obsessed with destroying the heavenly pavilion wherever she found them. This time, she even managed to obtain a fragment of the Wushan monument. He wondered what she was going to do with it. Chuzan suddenly became interested. Derive the location of the Wushan monument fragments and Yi Lingling's future over the next 100 years. Chuzan used the system's derivation function. A series of images appeared in front of him as the function was activated. In the images, there was a broken ruin with a powerful force that formed a restriction formation. Yi Lingling killed a cultivator and took a piece of jade from the ruin. After that, she was attacked by several experts. The scene continued, and Yi Lingling escaped and was chased by the experts of the Heavenly Pavilion. 30 years later, Yi Lingling was attacked and injured. She escaped and accidentally entered a dangerous place. She was trapped there, and even after the 100 years of derivation were up, she remained there. Chuzan frowned. That dangerous place was unusual, and Yi Lingling would probably be in danger. Furthermore, that place seemed to have been created by some old monster. Chuzan did not continue the derivation. Instead, he turned to look at Shui Ping, who had just finished planting some spiritual herbs. He had a plan in mind. Shui Ping, yes, master, it's time for you to go out and explore the world, and also discover your own Tao. I also have something for you to do, Chuzan said seriously. Shui Ping was inwardly jumping with joy. He could finally go out. Master, just say the word. A jade talisman then appeared in Chuzan's hand. It looked ordinary, but somehow also exuded an aura of mystery. 30 years later, your senior sister will encounter a crisis and be trapped here. Chuzan transmitted the location of the dangerous place into Shui Ping's mind. Take this talisman with you and go in there to save your senior sister. Shui Ping took the jade talisman in a daze. 30 years from now. Chuzan nodded and then said, just don't forget. Shui Ping was shocked. Could his master see the future? Otherwise, how would he know such information? Just who was his master? Yes, master, I will definitely accomplish this, Shui Ping said solemnly. Master, may I know who this senior sister is? Yi Lingling. Shui Ping's eyes widened in shock. Spirit goddess, Yi Lingling. The spirit goddess, who had come out of nowhere and caused trouble for the heavenly pavilion, was actually his senior sister. Chuzan raised his eyebrows. It seemed that Yi Lingling had made quite a name for herself in the outside world. Why is she called the spirit goddess? Chuzan was curious about how Yi Lingling got her nickname. Her nickname came from the heavenly pavilion, as she has the ethereal spiritual constitution, Shui Ping replied. Chuzan understood. The heavenly pavilion had still yet to realize the true nature of Yi Lingling's constitution, which had resulted in this error. Now that you know, don't forget. Be at that location in 30 years. Chuzan did not say much more. Master, what's senior sister Yi's rank? Shui Ping asked curiously. She's the 10th, I accepted her as a disciple 1,000 years ago. Where are the other 9 senior brothers and sisters? They will naturally appear when it is time. Although Shui Ping was curious, he did not pursue the matter. Over the next few days, Shui Ping made preparations for his journey. He grabbed a number of heavenly treasures from the valley. There was no lack of them there anyway. The other sects and major families all gave life-saving trump cards to their descendants and personal disciples when they went out to explore the world, so Shui Ping walked up to Chuzan shamelessly. Master, do the disciples of the Zongate sect receive any life-saving trump cards? Chuzan threw out a few jade talismans. Take it easy, don't provoke strong enemies just because you have something to protect your life. If you're weak, you won't even get the chance to use your trump cards, Chuzan warned him. I understand, Master. Shui Ping accepted the jade tokens excitedly. Then, he turned around and went to look for Lai Tian. This kid is really talented at taking advantage of others. He's probably going to ask Lai Tian for some trump cards as well. Chuzan was not bothered by this. Everyone had their own unique personalities, after all. Furthermore, although Yi Lingling did not ask for any trump cards, Chuzan had secretly prepared some for her. After all, she was his disciple, and there was no way he was going to let her be bullied by the old monsters out there. Soon, Shui Ping left, and the valley returned to its quiet state. Lai Tian once again resumed his secluded cultivation, and Chuzan continued his carefree life. He took out the heavenly Tao talisman and tried to communicate with the chaos, but it was to no avail. Derive the current state of the chaos. Chuzan had no choice but to use the derivation function to understand the situation in the chaos. In the image projection that was generated, the chaos had expanded countless times. The divine world was like a bright pearl in the center of the chaos. Furthermore, the heavenly Tao laws were making good progress in devouring the supreme laws. The heavenly Tao's growth was also on track. All in all, it could be said that the chaos was developing smoothly as usual. He thought of the other 2 huge chaoses. After the remaining smaller chaoses fused, it would naturally collide and fuse with those 2 as well. Once that was complete, the chaos would finally be whole again. It was during the collision and fusion with these 2 larger chaoses that the heavenly Tao would face its true test. Whether or not it could become the great Tao of the entire chaos would depend on this. The outcome was still full of uncertainties, as the other 2 larger chaoses had a higher upper limit, and their inhabitants would no doubt be stronger as well. Therefore, the heavenly Tao needed experts to protect it as it devoured the supreme laws of the others' chaoses. In any case, this would take a long time, so Chuzan was not too worried about it at the moment. He had enough time to become stronger. Chuzan then observed the origin Great Tao, which had grown rapidly within the void region. There was still a long way to go before it encompassed the void region around the chaos, but at the rate it was progressive, things were looking positive. Furthermore, as the origin Great Tao grew and fused with the void region, it seemed to have undergone some special changes. Even a Tao creation realm expert would not be able to easily discover the origin Great Tao, as it had now adopted some of the characteristics of the void region. Everything was going according to plan, and given time, would mature to provide Chuzan with bountiful rewards. Chuzan was very satisfied. 30 years after Shui Ping's departure, while Chuzan was planting a certain spiritual herb, the system's reward suddenly appeared. Your disciple, Shui Ping, saved your disciple, Yi Lingling, using your jade talisman and suppressed the remnant soul of a Tao creation realm cultivator. The name of the Zongate sect has begun to grow. You have been rewarded with the Zongate manual. Chuzan was a little surprised. He had indeed wanted to rescue Yi Lingling, but had not expected the outcome to result in the system's reward being triggered. Chuzan checked the reward. The Zongate manual includes the Zongate sect's cultivation techniques, secret techniques, and so on. It is the foundation for the creation of an orthodox sect. The reward came just in time. Since he had already established the Zongate sect, it needed its own repository of cultivation techniques and secret techniques. Chu Zan had originally planned to take some time to sort through his cultivation techniques and secret techniques and compile them, but the system had now made things simple for him. The Zan Gate manual contained all of the cultivation techniques and secret techniques that Chu Zan had mastered, as well as many cultivation techniques and secret techniques of the Heavenly Sun world. It could be called the Bible of cultivation. Even Chu Zan was inspired by it. For example, in the last chapter, there were records of the Tao Supreme Ruler Realm techniques. When Chu Zan returned from the medicinal garden to the small courtyard, he created a pavilion with a wave of his hand, after which he hung up a sign at its entrance. Zan Gate Scripture Pavilion. Following that, he made individual copies of the various cultivation techniques, secret techniques, and cultivation knowledge and stored them on the various floors of the pavilion. On the top floor, there was only a small booklet detailing the cultivation technique and knowledge regarding the Tao Supreme Realm. Chu Zan placed 3 small booklets regarding the Tao Creation Realm on the floor below, and so on and so forth. After Chu Zan was done, he held a booklet in his hand, drank tea, ate pastries, and leisurely read through it. This booklet was the transformed form of the Zan Gate Manual. Incidentally, the Zan Gate Manual was both a cultivation manual and a Tao Supreme artifact. Chu Zan was not in a hurry to read the entries on the Tao Supreme Realm, but instead satisfied himself with the entries on the Tao Creation Realm. There was no point in trying to jump the gun and attempting to comprehend things beyond his level. The Zan Gate Manual recorded many of the mysteries of the Tao Creation Realm, including how to create a Tao and how different the Taos were. Furthermore, it also talked about how the Tao could be restored after it collapsed. It was as if it contained all of the answers to all of the questions regarding cultivation. The more Chu Zan read, the deeper his comprehension became, and he gained a better understanding of the Tao Creation Realm. He even gained some insight on how to improve the 3,000 chaos bodies of creation. As Chu Zan read the chapter on creation, the masses of chaotic energy of creation gradually changed, as did the Tao path connecting them together. Even the embryonic supreme laws grew more complete and profound. Chu Zan's strength gradually increased as he read. At some point, Su Shaner walked out with a plate of pastries. Seeing the newly added Zan Gate Scripture Pavilion, she asked curiously, "Sir, what's inside?" "All of the answers to cultivation can be found there." Chu Zan raised his head and smiled. "Even for the transcendent Tao experts?" Su Shaner's eyes brightened. After coming to the Heavenly Sun world, Su Shaner also learned that transcending the chaos was known as the transcendent Tao realm in the Heavenly Sun world, which was also the realm she aspired to reach next. She was always with Chu Zan and did not have much time to cultivate. Even so, her cultivation was still progressing. This was because Chu Zan was deliberately emitting a special Tao aura that stimulated her cultivation. Of course, Chu Zan picked up a piece of cake and put it into his mouth. "Then I'll go take a look." Su Shaner excitedly ran into the Zan Gate Scripture Pavilion. Instead of having Chu Zan explain it to her, she preferred to read and learn things herself. This was also one of her joys in life. After following Chu Zan for a long time, Su Shaner had also started to live her life at a more casual pace. Of course, if she had questions, she would still seek him out for answers. After a short while, she emerged from the pavilion with a small booklet, which contained information on how to reach the transcendent Tao realm, as well as cultivation techniques and secret techniques associated with the transcendent Tao realm. Furthermore, this booklet seemed to have been tailored to fit someone who had possessed the Grand Moon mystic body. Su Shaner sat beside Chu Zan, and soon became engrossed in reading the booklet. 1,000 years later, Yi Lingling returned. "Greetings, Master." Yi Lingling had already reached the million-mile mark, which was known as the Saint Tao Emperor realm in the Heavenly Sun world. This corresponded to the World Creator realm in the chaos. She was indeed unparalleled, having reached this realm at such a young age, and had also accumulated quite a bit of fame in the Heavenly Sun world. This was in part due to her frequent conflicts with the Heavenly Pavilion, which was considered a powerful faction in the current Heavenly Sun world. The fact that an entire faction had failed to kill a single cultivator spoke volumes about her strength and capabilities. However, in Yi Lingling's heart, the one who was truly unparalleled and unfathomable was her master. It was as if he could gaze through time and see the future. She would never forget the time when she was in danger. Her junior brother, Shui Ping, had suddenly appeared with a jade talisman to rescue her. He had told her then that Chu Zan had predicted that this would happen to her, and instructed him to bring this jade talisman along and find her. Yi Lingling had come back not only to see her master, but also because she had some doubts about her cultivation after breaking through to the Saint Tao Emperor realm. Instead of trying to figure things out blindly, it was naturally better to come back and ask her master for advice. Moreover, she had not returned for a long time, and missed the time she had spent in the small courtyard. You can find the answer to your questions in the Zon Gate Scripture Pavilion. Chu Zan chuckled. Yi Lingling raised her head and spotted the pavilion that had not been here when she had last visited. Master, can I find the answer to everything in the Zon Gate Scripture Pavilion? Don't even think about it. How is that possible? Your cultivation level is still low, so you can naturally find the answer to your problems. However, at my level, all of the answers have to be figured out by oneself, Lai Tian said. He had awoken the moment Yi Lingling returned. Your answers can be found inside there as well, Chu Zan said. Sect Master, you can lie to little Yi, but you can't fool me. After losing their bet, Lai Tian now had to call Chu Zan Sect Master. Let's not talk about the end of the path of cultivation. Does your pavilion even contain answers to the Tao creation realm? Even the sects and families founded by Tao Supreme experts only had insights and experiences related to the Tao creation realm, but no actual concrete guide or manual. Everything was based on passed down knowledge and anecdotal evidence. Even though Tao Supreme realms could preach the Tao, it was only about their own Taos and experiences, and whether or not one would benefit from their teachings largely depended on how similar their Taos were to that Tao Supreme realm expert. How about this? Chu Zan said with a smile, if the pavilion contains what you were looking for, I'll play with your head like a ball for a few days. Lai Tian's eyes narrowed as he stared at Chu Zan for a long time. What if it doesn't? If it doesn't, I'll let you leave the valley for a year. Lai Tian glanced at Yi Lingling and sneered inwardly. There was no way that the Zon Gate Scripture Pavilion had any manuals or records on the Tao creation realm. Such a thing simply did not exist in the heavenly sun world. Chu Zan was probably just looking for an excuse to let him travel with Yi Lingling for a while. 752 Zon Gate Scripture Pavilion Part 2. Lai Tian thought that he had read Chu Zan's mind, so he immediately agreed. He likely wanted him to follow Yi Lingling for a while and give her some guidance, but he was too embarrassed to say it. Forget it, I won't expose him. Lai Tian chuckled, and Chu Zan was also smiling. Then I'll go in and take a look. Lai Tian laughed and floated towards the pavilion, and Yi Lingling followed closely behind him. The pavilion had a simple layout. The lowest floor contained secret manuals below the level of the Tao Yuan realm. The second level was for the Saint Tao to the Saint Tao Emperor realms. The third level was for Transcendent Tao Realm cultivators, the fourth for Tao Creation Realm cultivators, and the fifth for Tao Supreme Realm cultivators. Yi Lingling stopped on the second floor, as it contained what she needed. Soon, he found the secret manual pertaining to the Saint Tao Emperor realm, which also contained specific details about her special constitution. Lai Tian chuckled as he tried to go straight to the top floor, as he assumed that the Tao Creation Realm manuals were there. In the end, he found that he could not go up. There seemed to be an invisible barrier blocking him. Lai Tian was startled. With his cultivation level, could it be that he was unable to ascend to the highest level? The highest level could not contain Tao Supreme Realm manuals, right? No way. Chu Zan was not even a Tao Supreme Realm expert. Lai Tian immediately tossed that idea out of his head. Even a Tao Supreme Realm expert would not be able to create such a manual, as there was no treasure in the world that could contain the mysteries of the Tao Supreme Realm. Heck, it was even unheard of for the Tao Creation Realm. This was why many talented geniuses were stuck at the Transcendent Tao Realm. Creating a Tao was incredibly difficult, and he knew this as a former Tao Creation Realm cultivator. In order to create his own Tao, he had spent countless years. He often listened to the Tao lectures of Tao Supreme Realm cultivators, but that only helped once he had already gained insight into how to create his own Tao. Since he could not go to the highest floor, Lai Tian did not force his way in. Instead, he returned to the fourth floor. There he noticed that there were only 3 small booklets. He laughed inwardly. These 3 booklets were definitely for Transcendent Tao Realm cultivators. He raised his hand and grabbed one of them and casually flipped it open. His jaw proceeded to drop to the floor. The booklet was actually formed by the laws of the Great Tao. Furthermore, what was recorded in the booklet was truly about the Tao Creation Realm. As a former Tao Creation Realm expert, there was no mistaking this. The booklet detailed how to comprehend the Great Tao and how to create one's own Tao. It even recorded various shortcuts and tips, though some of these shortcuts would harm one's cultivation foundation and were not to be attempted unless they had no other options. Furthermore, the Taos created via these shortcuts were weak. Lai Tian was completely and utterly stunned. He looked at the booklet in his hand for a long time without moving. He seemed to have returned to the past. In order to reach the Tao creation realm, he had gone through many hardships and visited many Tao creation realm experts. He had paid a huge price to listen to the Tao lectures of Tao Supreme Realm experts. All of this was done just so that he could reach the Tao creation manual. If at that time he possessed this booklet instead, he would have been able to reach the Tao creation realm in a fraction of the time. It was simply unbelievable. He read through the booklet again and again, but could find nothing wrong with its contents. How could this booklet even exist? Just what was going on here? Furthermore, how did Chu Zan have access to all of this knowledge as someone who came from the chaos? This guy was full of mysteries and surprises. Lai Tian took a deep breath to calm his shocked heart. Then, he grabbed the second booklet and flipped through it, and then the third. They were all related to the Tao creation realm. 753 Zon Gate Scripture Pavilion Part 3. Lai Tian stretched out his hand and grabbed the third booklet. He flipped it open and took a look. Suddenly, his head trembled. The combination of heaven and earth, and yin and yang, is a perfect Tao. In the heavenly sun world, the great Tao is filled with yang while yin is weak, so the great Tao is incomplete. At this very moment, Lai Tian recalled the words that person had said to him after he created his Tao. She told him to go to the chaos once he had the opportunity to do so. Back then, Lai Tian had thought that she wanted him to barge into the forbidden zone, but now it seemed that she was nudging him toward a certain secret. Was the Tao he had created actually incomplete? Was it flawed? Lai Tian was in a daze. He realized that he only had a smattering of knowledge about the Tao creation realm. In fact, most of the Tao creation realm experts in the heavenly sun world were probably the same. As he continued to read, Lai Tian suddenly trembled. This booklet actually recorded it. It recorded how to recover from a collapsed Tao. This made him extremely excited. There was hope for his recovery. He could reach the Tao creation realm again, and this time he would create a perfect Tao. He would definitely be stronger. He continued to read, but then discovered that he could read no further. There was something hindering his sight. Lai Tian was dumbfounded and rushed out of the pavilion with the booklet in hand, startling Yi Lingling on the way down. Senior Lai Tian. What's going on? What's next? Why can't I see the text after this page? Lai Tian frantically asked Chu Zan as he gestured toward the booklet. Chu Zan simply replied nonchalantly, all you have is your head. Since you don't have the rest of your body, you can't read the rest of the booklet. Huh, what kind of logic was this? Sect Master, I'm also from the Zon Gate sect, and was once a Tao creation realm expert. I should be qualified to see the rest, right? Lai Tian was so anxious that he was pacing around the courtyard. You've lost this time, right? Yes, I admit defeat. Lai Tian nodded. That's good. Chu Zan stood up and grabbed the booklet. Then, as Lai Tian looked at him with a puzzled gaze, Chu Zan kicked him in the head, and with a whoosh, Lai Tian flew away. Lai Tian felt dizzy as his head spun in the air. He was stunned. What was going on? Then, he suddenly remembered that he had lost the best and was going to be kicked around like a ball. He had been tricked. However, there was nothing he could do about it. Lai Tian hurriedly floated back. Sect Master, you've already kicked me, so can you let me see the rest of the booklet's content? Lai Tian asked with a flattering smile. One kick is not enough. Then, Sect Master, kick me as hard as you can. The more you kick me, the happier I will be. Chu Zan looked at Lai Tian with a strange expression. The old man was actually so shameless. It was just a Tao creation realm manual. Was there a need to go this far? Then, if he knew that the top floor contained a Tao Supreme manual, would he not shamelessly acknowledge Chu Zan as his grandfather? Old man, what happened to your pride? Pride, what good is that? This guy was hopeless. However, it worked. Chu Zan threw the booklet to him and said, go and look at it then. Lai Tian was overjoyed and brought the manual back to the pavilion to read. Occasionally, he would raise his head and glance at the entrance to the highest floor. His eyes were filled with shock. He had an inkling of what was hidden on that floor. The Tao Supreme Realm Manual. If he could recover his strength, perhaps he too would one day be able to read it and reach the Tao Supreme Realm. Thinking this, he immersed himself in reading the manual. He did not come out even after Yi Lingling departed the valley and went out for another adventure. Even Chu Zan was engrossed in reading the Zon Gate manual every day. 100 years later, Shui Ping returned, and also entered the pavilion to read manuals for a few years. The heavenly sun world was vast and boundless. However, Thanks to the Great Battle, the Heavenly Sun world suffered tremendous damage and was divided into many smaller sections. In a section near the center of the Heavenly Sun world, there were countless experts, with many of them being Saint Tao Emperor realm or higher. The forces of this section knew many secrets of the Heavenly Sun world, and had a better understanding of the world. There were even ancient forces that had been passed down from the ancient times, though many had declined after the Great Battle. There were even rumors that some of their founding members had survived, but were in a state of deep sleep. Scarlet Cloud Mountain was one of these forces. At its peak, it had 2 Tao Creation Realm experts. However, it had declined after the Great Battle, and now kept a low profile, and not many people knew about it. At this moment, in the secret area of Scarlet Cloud Mountain, someone was looking respectfully at a figure sitting cross-legged in a small space. This was the Scarlet Cloud Mountain's ancestor who had survived from ancient times. He had remained in seclusion and never left the sect, seeking to break through to the next realm. Grand Master, I heard that the Heavenly Pavilion has already collected 5 fragments of the Wushan Monument. They are currently chasing after a disciple of the Zongate sect who has one of the fragments. Grand Master, who created the Zongate sect? At present, that sect only has 2 disciples, but both are monstrously talented, to the point they overshadow the geniuses of the major factions. The Zongate sect. The old man in the small space was confused. Back then, there was no sect with this name. Perhaps it is a new faction. Tell me more about the Zongate sect. After hearing more about the Zongate sect, the old man fell silent. The sect's disciples were extremely powerful, and their cultivation techniques were also extraordinary. Especially Yi Lingling, who seemed to possess the same specific constitution as a certain Tao Supreme Realm expert he knew from the past. If she grew to her full potential, she would be terrifyingly strong. For a sect to know of her special constitution, it had to be related to a major force of the Heavenly Sun world, or perhaps even a Tao Supreme Realm expert. Don't mess with the Zongate sect. As for Yi Lingling, if it's within your power, try to assist her. No matter what, you can't offend them, understand? Yes, ancestor. The man's expression turned serious. For the Zongate sect to be treated so seriously by the Grand Master, they had to be extraordinary. After the man left, the old man sighed. A long time had passed. Did all the Heavenly Sun world's experts from back then die? The Master of the Chaos was so magnificent that he could suppress the entire Heavenly Sun world. If it had not been for that person's intervention, the Heavenly Sun world would have already been shattered. Where did they go? Had they all really died? Now that he thought about it, the Great Battle back then was extremely unusual. It was as if someone was manipulating the situation from behind the scenes. What role did the Wushan Pavilion play in this matter? Lai Tian, why did you participate? The old man sighed. Lai Tian was famous, and this old man and Lai Tian were good friends who had once traveled and explored the world together when they were younger. Their relationship did not even change after a gap in cultivation level between them opened up. Back then, Lai Tian had also participated in that battle. He could have avoided it. 754 Undercurrents. The top forces of the central section of the Heavenly Sun world were all gathered here. Many forces had legacies from ancient times or were secretly supported by ancient experts. At this moment, on a certain mountain peak where traces of the Great Battle were still present, more than 10 transcendent Tao realm experts were gathered. A few of these were the ones who had chased after Chu Zan. Is that man really dead? I don't know. While they were chasing Chu Zan down, it appeared that he had self-destructed. They felt that something was wrong, but could not find any traces of Chu Zan no matter where they looked. Have you asked your seniors? The people here were tasked with guarding the entrance to the Forbidden Zone, and each of them hailed from forces that possessed at least a Tao Creation Realm expert. One of them, whose face and figure were blurry, said, 100 years ago, a Tao Creation Realm expert tried to enter the chaos to investigate. In the end, his Tao was damaged, and his cultivation level almost dropped a realm. Hearing this, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. They were guarding the entrance of the Forbidden Zone, so they were naturally very curious about the legendary chaos. Moreover, they also knew that there might be great opportunities hidden in the Forbidden Zone, including perhaps the opportunity for them to reach the Tao Creation Realm. Tao Creation Realm experts were highly regarded in the Heavenly Sun world, so it was the dream of every single cultivator to become one. However, they were unable to pass through the void region, as they would be contaminated by a mysterious force that would cause their cultivation to gradually dissipate. This old man had once taken the risk to enter, but he was contaminated by the mysterious force, which was why he looked so old. They were very interested in Chuzan because he was also a transcendent Dao realm cultivator, yet could pass through the void region safely. Furthermore, he had emerged from the Forbidden Zone, so it was clear that he knew some of its secrets. Was he someone from the Forbidden Zone, or had he left the Heavenly Sun world and returned after obtaining a great opportunity in the Forbidden Zone? No matter what the situation was, it was a great opportunity for them to learn the secrets of the Forbidden Zone. However, now it seemed that even Dao Creation Realm experts could not pass through the Void region. There's an order from a Dao Supreme Realm expert, the blurry figure continued, don't even think about entering the Forbidden Zone. Even Dao Creation Realm experts can't leave the Heavenly Sun world. Also, the Dao Supreme Realm experts can't divine who that person is. They've already sent out a warning to stop searching. The rest of the people present were all silent. It seemed that this matter was not something they could participate in. Furthermore, who would dare to disobey the words of a Dao Supreme Realm existence? After a short discussion, they all went their separate ways. The blurry figure disappeared and entered a section that was in ruins thanks to the great battle back then. There was an extremely powerful remnant power here that occasionally wreaked havoc on the surroundings. After the blurry figure entered this section, he headed toward a certain mountain, on which there was a stone house. An invisible force enveloped the stone house, keeping any foreign powers out. The blurry figure arrived in front of the stone house. Sir, are you certain that he came from the chaos? He bowed and asked. After a long while, an ethereal voice came from the stone house. It was impossible to tell if its owner was male or female. The Heavenly Sun world is in a unique state at the moment. One can enter it, but cannot leave. With the obstruction of the transcendent laws in place, even Dao Creation Realm experts cannot leave. Since he came in from the outside, he naturally came from the chaos. If that's the case, the other party must be hiding in the Heavenly Sun world, right? Since he can't return to the chaos now, the blurry figure continued to ask. The same restrictions may not apply to those from the chaos. After a long silence, the ethereal voice spoke again, no matter what, since he came from the chaos, this matter is not something you can interfere with. Just sit back and watch. The time is not right. The blurry figure was silent for a long time before he finally asked, what are you guys planning? The stone house remained silent. The blurry figure waited for a moment, sighed in his heart, and turned to leave. This time, the other party would not answer either. In the end, a voice came from the stone house. We don't know either. It's just that there seems to be someone manipulating this whole situation, so we have to be careful. For the first time, there was a hint of helplessness in his voice. The blurry figure froze, and only recovered after a long time. Then, he took a deep breath and left quickly. His heart was unable to calm down for a long time. Even Dao Supreme Realm experts were affected and manipulated by others. How terrifying was the mastermind behind all of this then? At the same time, he felt a sense of powerlessness. If even Dao Supreme Realm cultivators could not escape, how could he escape this fate as a mere Dao Creation Realm expert? 755 Dao Supreme Realm. Chuzan wanted to transmit a message to the chaos again to make some arrangements, but once again failed. Now, his strength was no longer what it was in the past, and he could be considered one of the stronger Dao Creation Realm experts. Yet despite this, he was unable to transmit a message into the Heavenly Dao. Was he restricted by the transcendent laws? Chuzan suddenly realized that this matter was not as simple as it seemed. The chaos had shattered in that great battle, but what about the Heavenly Sun world? Was it only divided into small sections? Chuzan suddenly realized that his understanding of the Heavenly Sun world was still lacking. He thought of a possibility. Perhaps the Heavenly Sun world was in a sealed state, and they were unable to leave. Otherwise, there would definitely be experts from the Heavenly Sun world who would have entered the chaos. Thinking this, Chuzan grabbed Lai Tian, who was still engrossed in reading the Dao Creation Realm manual. Having been suddenly grabbed out of nowhere, his eyes were still a little dazed. Sect Master, what's wrong? He was nervous. Could it be that Chuzan did not intend to allow him to continue reading the manual? While you were in the chaos for so long, did you ever see anyone from the Heavenly Sun world? Chuzan asked. Lai Tian was startled, not understanding why he asked such a question. You're the first person I've met. Before you, I've never seen any other living beings, he said. I haven't seen any of the experts from the Heavenly Sun world either. Of course, I can't rule out the possibility that there could have been experts who came by who were able to hide from me, he added after a pause. Chuzan nodded, and allowed Lai Tian to head back into the pavilion. If one was able to hide from Lai Tian and not be the slightest bit interested in him, that person had to be a Dao Supreme Realm expert, and not a newly advanced one either. Otherwise, how could he not be curious about Lai Tian and not want to ask him questions about what had happened in the chaos? Therefore, this indirectly confirmed his conjecture that ever since that great battle, no expert had entered the chaos from the heavenly sun world. It seemed that it was not that they did not want to, but they could not. Could one only enter the heavenly sun world, but not leave it? Chuzan used the derivation function. Can Dao creation realm experts of the heavenly sun world leave this world and enter the chaos? The system did not display an image projection this time, but merely sent him a notification that read, Dao creation realm cultivators can't leave the heavenly sun world. His conjecture was confirmed. Chuzan now felt even more that he had to keep a low profile. There were huge undercurrents at play here, and unless he was strong enough, he would be swept away by the. Chuzan made up his mind. Even if he broke through to the Dao Supreme Realm, he would continue to keep a low profile. Although Dao Supreme Realm experts could be considered to be among the foremost experts in this world, they were not omnipotent. Furthermore, there was still the Dao Supreme Ruler Realm. According to what Lai Tian had told him, Dao Supreme Realm experts could easily be crushed by a Dao Supreme Ruler. It was too terrifying. Chuzan stayed in the valley and continued to live his life. He did not need to cultivate, yet his strength was getting stronger with every day. This kind of life was really too comfortable. As for boredom, that word did not exist in his dictionary. He was getting stronger every day, and that itself was happiness. 10,000 years had passed in a flash. You did not leave the valley and stayed at home for 10,000 years. You taught 2 monstrous disciples and created the Zon Gate sect. You have been rewarded with a Dao Supreme Realm breakthrough, a supreme treasure, and a chance to upgrade a great Dao. The 10,000-year milestone reward was quite generous, and allowed Chuzan to break through to the Dao Supreme Realm, which would allow him to hold his own in the heavenly sun world to an extent. Furthermore, there were 2 other rewards. Chuzan first received his cultivation reward, and quickly broke through the Dao Supreme Realm. Now, he finally understood why it was called the Dao Supreme Realm. It was known as the end of the path of cultivation because it seemed like one could continue cultivating forever, yet also seemed like one had reached the end. It was a very mysterious state. It felt that this realm was already the peak, and there were no realms above it. Of course, it did not mean that one's strength would not continue to grow after reaching the Dao Supreme Realm. Chuzan examined his own strength and marveled at the power of the Dao Supreme Realm. Dao Supreme Realm experts were already supreme in the truest sense. Even if there was a gap in strength between 2 Dao Supreme Realm experts, it was almost impossible for the stronger one to kill the weaker ones, unless of course one became a Dao Supreme Ruler. Knowing this, it was even more shocking that the Master of the Chaos had managed to slaughter Dao Supreme Realm experts like chickens. Chuzan sighed and sat back in his chair. His heart was finally at ease. He then checked the Supreme Treasure reward, and discovered that it did not have a specific shape or ability. To be more precise, it could take on any shape and possess any ability. Whether it was used for defense or attack, his thoughts would be able to mold it. A small seal appeared in Chuzan's palm, and he realized that the Chaos Bell, Heaven-Splitting Axe, Myriad Heavenly Mirror, and the Chaos Dao Mirror that the system had given him as rewards before had all disappeared. All of them gathered together to form this supreme treasure. Focusing his thoughts, the seal turned into an ancient bell, and then a mirror. Finally, it turned back into a seal and he put it away within the Dao path in his body. In the future, this shall be called the Supreme Mystic Seal. Chuzan gave it a name, and also made it the Zon Gate's ancestral treasure. The person who held the Supreme Mystic Seal would be the leader of the Zon Gate sect. Chuzan looked at the last reward. A chance to upgrade a great Dao. Chuzan took out the Heavenly Dao Talisman, but in the end, dispelled the idea. Upgrading the Heavenly Dao could indeed increase its strength and help it to become the only supreme law and unify the chaos, but the situation in the chaos was beyond his control, so anything could happen. Therefore, he decided to upgrade the Origin Great Dao. Even if the Heavenly Dao did not become the only supreme law, as long as the Origin Great Dao grew smoothly, it would encompass the chaos eventually. Therefore, he would still be in control of the chaos. Upgrade the Origin Great Dao. After Chuzan chose to upgrade the Origin Great Dao, he immediately sensed some changes. The origin Great Tao instantly grew rapidly and continuously produced new laws. Then, it completely vanished into the void. No, to be precise, it turned into part of the void region. He now had control over that part of the void region. Furthermore, he could sense that the origin Great Tao was constantly growing and expanding. Chu Zan was overjoyed. Even a Tao Supreme Realm expert would not be able to discover the upgraded origin Great Tao. Moreover, the origin Great Tao had the same level of power as a Tao Supreme Realm expert. If Chu Zan used it, he would be able to wield the power of 2 Tao Supreme Realm cultivators. To his opponents, it would be like fighting 2 Tao Supreme Realm experts. 756 The Situation in the Chaos Part 1. After observing the origin Great Tao for a while, Chu Zan looked back at the Heavenly Tao Talisman. Now that he had reached the Tao Supreme Realm, it was time to try contacting them again. So many years passed, and he really wanted to know how things were progressing within the chaos. The second chaos calamity had probably passed, and another chaos had fused, right? Chu Zan had a new plan in mind. Even though Ding Yu and the other disciples could transcend the chaos, they could not leave for the time being, as it was easy to be targeted after coming out of the chaos. Chu Zan believed that those experts would be secretly paying attention to the chaos since they could not find any traces of his presence in the Heavenly Sun world. Moreover, the chaos was constantly merging and expanding, and would eventually become whole again. The Heavenly Tao needed someone's assistance to develop, or it would not be able to grow to its full potential and unify the supreme laws of the chaoses. Chu Zan held the Heavenly Tao Talisman in his hand, and then tried to transmit a wisp of his consciousness through it. He could vaguely sense a transcendent rule restriction trying to stop his transmission from leaving the scope of the transcendent law. Even if one was a Tao Supreme Realm expert, it would be difficult to break through the restriction. Moreover, it might alert some of the existences that were secretly plotting things. Chu Zan silently activated the Supreme Mystic Seal, which emitted a special profound aura. The restriction of the transcendent laws suddenly quieted down after coming into contact with this aura, and disappeared without a sound. It was as he expected, supreme treasures were not restricted by the transcendent laws. Chu Zan's wisp of consciousness was then transmitted into the Heavenly Tao. In an instant, Chu Zan saw that the chaos had changed greatly. The Heavenly Tao had become one of the 3 remaining supreme laws of the chaos. The original chaos had already collided and fused with a second chaos. In other words, after Chu Zan left, it had already experienced 2 chaos calamities. The Heavenly Tao had unified the supreme laws of the original chaos, but now it was up against the supreme laws of the other 2 chaoses. The Heavenly Tao's side consisted of Ding Yu and Chu Zan's other disciples, as well as the Chaos Supreme Realm experts like Giant Chaos God and the others. They were up against the Chaos Supreme Realm experts of the other 2 chaoses. The Heavenly Tao was slightly stronger than the other 2 supreme laws of the chaos. The moment Chu Zan's wisp of consciousness entered, the transcendent laws slowly exhausted him, so after a while, he could not continue to observe the Heavenly Tao. However, he had already achieved his goal. In the chaos, after countless years, Ding Yu and the others had become the top existences among the Chaos Supreme experts. Since Chu Zan had given them a cultivation method that would allow them to transcend the chaos, they naturally grew stronger than the other Chaos Supreme Realm experts. As for He Yu and Chu Yi, their strength had surpassed the other disciples. As a divine being of the Heavenly Tao, Qin was naturally extremely powerful. Chu and Ji had already reached the Chaos Supreme Realm. Even Sha and Hong as well, though they were comparatively weaker. In the first Chaos Calamity, when 2 Chaos Supreme experts from the 2 sides fought, the Heavenly Tao's side was actually at a disadvantage at the beginning. After stabilizing the situation, the Heavenly Tao started to devour and occupy the other side's supreme laws. Once it completed this process, the original chaos gained the upper hand. However, before the outcome of the battle was decided, the second chaos tribulation arrived. The new chaos, experts were great in number and powerful, and forced the first 2 sides to join forces to resist the onslaught. In the end, they slowly formed a 3-way deadlock. Amidst this, the Heavenly Tao developed very quickly. As time passed, He Yu and Chu Yi's strength increased rapidly, and the Heavenly Tao became the strongest side, forcing the other 2 to form an alliance. Within the Heavenly Tao, Huang Long was roaming about. His days were very comfortable. Suddenly, he looked somewhere. His eyes were filled with shock. Fellow Taoist Chu, a blurry phantom appeared in the Heavenly Tao. It was Chu Zan's wisp of consciousness. Long time no see, Huang Long. Fellow Taoist Chu, what's wrong with you? The dragon god asked in surprise as he circled around the blurry phantom. His aura was very strange and unfathomable, and Huanglong could not tell that it was just a wisp of consciousness. Could it be that fellow Taoist Chu had fallen and was going to be reborn in the heavenly Tao? This is just a wisp of consciousness I transmitted here to send some information to my disciples, Chu Zan replied. Huanglong was shocked. Fellow Taoist Chu's wisp of consciousness was so unfathomable. What level had his strength reached? Fellow Taoist Chu, what's the outside world like? Is it fun? Huanglong asked excitedly. Huanglong, don't leave the chaos. The chaos is about to enter the Great Chaos Era, which will be more interesting than the outside world. Chu Zan knew that Huanglong was playful. If he was curious and left the chaos, it would be a little troublesome if he was targeted. The Great Chaos Era, ... Chu Zan briefly explained the situation regarding the multiple chaoses. After hearing this, Huanglong was filled with anticipation and did not have any intention of leaving the chaos. At least, he had to wait until the chaos fully merged before he could go outside. Chu Zan's wisp of consciousness chatted with Huanglong as he sent a message to Ding Yu and the others through the heavenly Tao. After Ding Yu and the others received the news, they quickly rushed back. They were all extremely excited. Chu Zan saw that He Yu and Chu Yi would soon be capable of transcending the chaos. Transcending the chaos was actually transcending the Tao realm. One did not necessarily have to leave the chaos to transcend it. 757 The Situation in the Chaos Part 2. Of course, the chaos was too small and could not contain transcendent Tao realm experts. If one did not leave the chaos, they wouldn't be able to break through further. However, as the chaos continued to merge and expand, it would become possible. When the chaos was at its peak, even Tao Supreme Realm experts existed. Chu Zan suspected that there were transcendent Tao realm experts in the other two bigger chaoses. Greetings, Master. Qin and Feng Ying also appeared. The two of them were divine beings of the heavenly Tao, so they naturally needed to know about these matters. Only then would they be able to execute his plan accurately. Chu Zan glanced at his disciples and said, the chaos is about to welcome a great era. It's a great opportunity. Hey you, you're not far from transcending the chaos. My wisp of consciousness returned to inform you that the next realm is the transcendent Tao realm. Wait for the opportunity to break through and do not leave the chaos. Beyond the chaos are the void region and the heavenly sun world. Once you leave the chaos, there will be changes. Chu Zan then continued in a deep voice, some people are setting up a grand scheme. It's not something you can interfere with. If you are caught within it, the results will be catastrophic. I understand, Master. He Yu nodded. Chu Zan then began to give them instructions regarding the heavenly Tao. This was a matter of great importance and was closely related to everyone's strength. Naturally, they did not dare to be careless. Master, do you mean that we are in a small chaos? And that the chaoses are constantly fusing with each other, which will trigger the Great Chaos Era? Ding Yu's face was filled with shock. So this was the truth behind the chaos calamity. The current chaos was almost boundless, and it was expanding at every moment. Even they could not reach its boundaries. Yet in the end, this was just a small chaos. There were two more chaoses that were far bigger than this chaos. That's right, Chu Zan nodded. These chaoses used to be a single great chaos. It was shattered in a great battle and is now recovering. This is your opportunity. What you need to do is to make the heavenly Tao the only supreme law in the unified great chaos. You don't have to fight all of them head-on. You can entice some of their experts to join the heavenly Tao as well. He Yu nodded. She was one of the executors of the heavenly Tao talisman plan. If the heavenly Tao became the only supreme law of the great chaos, it would be a huge opportunity for everyone present. If they became aware of this possibility, some experts would definitely be tempted. Chu Zan continued to assign them some tasks. The core mission was completed. All of you are from the Zon Gate sect. I will leave a Zon Gate sect manual in the heavenly Tao. You can study it as much as you want to prepare for the day you enter the heavenly sun world and combine yin and yang. Chu Zan then called over Qin, Ren Chang, and the rest of the Zon Gate sect and gave them some missions. The core mission was only known to the personal disciples and core figures. When all of the members of the Zon Gate sect had gathered, Chu Zan preached the Tao to them. Qin Ying, Ren Chang and Kingslayer were on the verge of reaching the Chaos Supreme Realm, and it would not be difficult for them to break through after this. Then, Chu Zan met the giant Chaos God and the others, including the Immortal, Celestial and Demon ancestors. Even though they were not part of the Zon Gate sect, they were still on the same side, so Chuzan gave them some pointers and told them about the secrets of the chaos. This was a major event that required cooperation, and their help would make his disciples' mission easier to accomplish. In the end, Chuzan met with his 9 disciples and Chu Pingfan alone, and told them about the heavenly sun world, the time flow difference, cultivation realms, and many other different things. He warned them that eventually, there would be experts and forces that would definitely covet the heavenly Tao and even want to control it. This was because the heavenly Tao was rather special and had the potential to become a transcendent law. Now that the chaos had shattered and the supreme laws had been separated, they had yet to form a complete state. The heavenly Tao thus had the opportunity to become the new transcendent law of the chaos. What you need to do is to break through to the Tao creation realm during the Great Chaos era and stop other living beings from destroying or hindering the growth of the heavenly Tao. The Zon Gate Sect manual includes details regarding the Tao creation realm. When you guys break through to the transcendent Tao realm, you can try to comprehend the Tao creation realm. Don't worry, Master, we know what to do. Hey Yu nodded. Hey you know better than them how to plan and control the overall situation. I believe you can do it. Chuzan was more at ease with Hey Yu in charge. In terms of planning, she was a specialist. After giving his instructions, Chuzan's wisp of consciousness began to disappear. I'll be waiting for you all to emerge as the leaders of the Great Chaos era. ... When the wisp of consciousness disappeared, a thick book appeared. The Zon Gate Sect's manual. After that, it disappeared into the heavenly Tao. Only those with the heavenly Tao seal could read its contents. Chuzan also gave some authority to some other members of the Zon Gate Sect, but their access was limited to information related to the transcendent Tao realm. Only Ding Yu and the other personal disciples could see the entire contents of the manual, though this would also depend on their own strength. As for the regular members of the Zon Gate Sect, they could only see content related to the Chaos Supreme Realm. Even so, it was still incredible. This was because within it, there was an explanation on how to cultivate and how to break through to the transcendent Tao realm. Other than that, Chuzan also gave He Yu and the others additional authority to allow people outside of the sect to read some of the contents below the Tao creation realm. This would be used to rope in people. In the heavenly sun world, the Zon Gate Sect began to gain some fame. However, so far, only 2 disciples of the Zon Gate Sect were known, which caused the sect to be shrouded in a mysterious veil. There were only 2 disciples traveling the world, yet both were astonishingly talented and extremely powerful. Yi Lingling was a Saint Tao Emperor, and she also held the title of the youngest Saint Tao Emperor in the heavenly sun world. Shui Ping used to be a disciple of a large family, but his status was not high and he had been thrown aside. He was already a Saint Tao King now, and immensely powerful. He once fought 3 Saint Tao Kings of the Heavenly Pavilion alone and killed them. Just 2 disciples of the Zon Gate Sect were sufficient to suppress the Heavenly Pavilion. In fact, no one from the Heavenly Pavilion wanted to attack Yi Lingling anymore. Instead, they wanted to bury the hatchet. Anyone could tell that the Zon Gate Sect was extraordinary. If the disciples were already this powerful, how powerful would their sect master be? This was also the reason why the Heavenly Pavilion refrained from sending their old monsters to pursue Yi Lingling and Shui Ping. Yi Lingling's strength was growing rapidly, so the Heavenly Pavilion was faced with 2 choices. One was to take action and eliminate the threat. However, they were unsure if they could withstand the revenge of the Zon Gate Sect. The second option was naturally to bury the hatchet. The enmity between the Heavenly Pavilion and Yi Lingling was actually triggered by the latter's dissatisfaction with the ranking list. Recently, there had been rumors that the Heavenly Pavilion had admitted defeat and was preparing to compensate her and resolve the enmity between them. As for whether Yi Lingling would accept it or not, no one knew. Furthermore, Shui Ping seemed to have a grudge with another powerful faction. Many powerful cultivators were waiting to see if any more experts of the Zon Gate Sect would appear to support these 2 disciples and display their strength. Chuzan was not bothered by their situation. Those with great fate would not die so easily. Instead, he decided to focus on helping Lai Tian to recover his strength. After all, Lai Tian would be able to help him accomplish many things on his behalf. After Lai Tian read the booklet containing the Tao creation realm information, he was quite confident in his chances of restoring and recreating his Tao. However, his injuries were too severe. If he were to rely on himself, it would take countless years for him to recover. Before that, Chuzan needed to understand the pinnacle of power in the heavenly sun world. How many Tao Supreme Realm experts are there in the heavenly sun world? In his mind, an image projection appeared when he used the system's derivation function. There were a total of 6 figures in the image projection. How many broke through to the Tao Supreme Realm after the Great Battle? None. The current 6 Tao Supreme Realm experts were all old monsters. The completion of Yin and Yang was a necessary condition for breaking through to the Tao Supreme Realm. At present, all living beings in the Heavenly Sun world were unable to leave the Heavenly Sun world, so naturally, there was no Tao Creation Realm expert who could break through to the Tao Supreme Realm. How about Tao Supreme rulers in the Heavenly Sun world? Chu Zan was a little nervous. If there was a Tao Supreme ruler in the Heavenly Sun world, he'd have to be a lot more wary. There are none for the time being. Chu Zan heaved a sigh of relief. Since there was no Tao Supreme ruler in the Heavenly Sun world, he would be able to act more freely. If there were, the system would likely have prompted him to consume origin energy to derive the result. However, the system's response also meant that a Tao Supreme ruler might appear in the future. Tell me when the Tao Supreme ruler will appear in the Heavenly Sun world. This derivation will consume 1% of your origin energy. Do you wish to continue? Chu Zan's heart sank. As expected, a Tao Supreme ruler would appear in the Heavenly Sun world in the future. He could not afford to be careless. Chu Zan did not choose to continue. He muttered to himself for a moment and changed his request. After 1,000 years, will there be a Tao Supreme ruler in the Heavenly Sun world? No. Chu Zan heaved a sigh of relief. There was still time then. How about 10,000 years? Not for certain. This time, the result was slightly different. It was, not for certain, which meant that a Tao Supreme ruler might appear in 10,000 years. There were too many variables when deriving the future. If the period of time was too long, the uncertainty value was too high. Therefore, the system could not give an accurate answer. Chu Zan did not continue deriving, even though he knew that the shattering of the chaos and the sealing of the Heavenly Sun world might be hiding a great scheme. He did not try to derive it, as it was beyond his control, and the amount of origin energy he would need to consume would definitely be exorbitant. It was enough that no Tao Supreme ruler would appear in the next 1,000 years. He had to get stronger, and believed that he could become a Tao Supreme ruler in 100,000 years. However, since his timeline and the system's derivation prediction timeline differed so greatly, it was basically certain that he was not the Tao Supreme ruler that would appear after 1,000 years. Would the Master of the Chaos return? Or the ruler of the Heavenly Sun world? Of course, it could not be ruled out that one of the current Tao Supreme Realm experts would break through to become a Tao Supreme ruler. Thinking this, Chu Zan tried to derive something else. The scene of a Heavenly Sun world Tao Supreme Realm expert breaking through to the Tao Supreme ruler realm. None found. When he saw the answer, he was certain that the future Tao Supreme ruler was not one of the 6 Tao Supreme Realm cultivators in the Heavenly Sun world. Chu Zan sat on a chair and made himself a pot of tea. Then, he picked up a piece of cake and stuffed it into his mouth as he looked at the wooden house Su Shaner was staying in. She was currently in seclusion to break through to the transcendent Tao realm. Before she went into seclusion, she had made a lot of pastries and snacks in advance. Without his maidservant around to serve him, Chu Zan was forced to make tea himself. He raised his hand and grabbed Lai Tian. Lai Tian said helplessly, "What now?" At this moment, his head was in Chu Zan's hand, and he felt extremely uncomfortable. You've been reading the Tao Creation Realm booklet for a long time and must have gained a lot of insights. Are you confident in restoring your Tao? Chu Zan asked. Lai Tian shook his head. Although I'm confident that I can recreate my Tao, and that it'll be stronger than before, and even that I'll have a chance of breaking through to the Tao Supreme Realm after reforging my Tao, it's too difficult. I don't even know how long it will take for me to recover. My injuries are not light after all. Chu Zan was not surprised. Lai Tian had stayed at the edge of the chaos for a long time, surviving simply by absorbing the spiritual energy of the chaos. Although he had been gravely injured, in reality, he had also benefited from this by absorbing the yin-based spiritual energy of the chaos, completing the balance of yin and yang in his cultivation. It could be said that the one who had protected Lai Tian back then had protected his life, and even helped him to complete the yin and yang of his cultivation. Was it that Tao Supreme Realm expert that he admired? Could it be that she was also interested in Lai Tian? Do you have any questions regarding the Tao Creation Realm? I can answer them for you, Chu Zan asked. Lai Tian muttered to himself for a moment before he said, the Tao Creation Realm is based on the completion of yin and yang. I realized that in my previous Tao, if yin and yang were not complete, how could I complete them? Ever since he had seen the Tao Creation Realm booklet in the Zon Gate Scripture Pavilion, Lai Tian no longer regarded Chu Zan as an ordinary Tao Creation Realm expert. Chu Zan gave him an unfathomable feeling. It was as if all questions about cultivation could be answered by Chu Zan. Although Lai Tian had some speculations about yin and yang, he was not too sure. However, he believed that it involved the chaos. If his guess was correct, then the path to the Tao Supreme Realm had already been monopolized by some existences. Without a strong background or a powerful force to back one up, no matter how talented someone was, they would never be able to reach the Tao Supreme Realm. The sun in the sky is yang, and the chaos is yin. Actually, you already knew this. Why ask? Chu Zan smiled. Of course, yin also exists in the heavenly sun world, and yang also exists in the chaos. However, no matter whether you are in the chaos or the heavenly sun world, it's impossible to reach the Tao Supreme Realm without having enough of both. You've survived at the edge of chaos for such a long time and survived by devouring the chaos, spiritual energy. In fact, you've already made up for the missing yin and have already completed your yin and yang balance. Lai Tian smiled bitterly, and he had a complicated expression on his face. Chu Zan looked at him and asked curiously, since you had the support of a Tao Supreme Realm expert, why didn't you enter the chaos? Lai Tian sighed. I didn't understand at the time. Although she was a Tao Supreme Realm expert, she wasn't the master of a big sect. There were some restrictions that meant that she could not point things out directly. I had to comprehend it on my own. She must have reached some sort of agreement with the other Tao Supreme Realm cultivators. It's a pity that I was too stupid to comprehend her true intent. Chu Zan did not ask any further. It appeared that for the most part, the Tao Supreme Realm cultivators had monopolized the path to the Tao Supreme Realm. Chu Zan patted Lai Tian's head and said, since you've joined the Zon Gate sect, the path to the top is open. Thank you, Sect Master. Lai Tian's eyes lit up. I will help you to recover from your injuries and regain your strength. It's time for the Zon Gate sect to send out some experts to show off its strength. The mystery of the Zon Gate sect must also be supported by strength, Chu Zan said. Lai Tian was extremely excited. However, he was also shocked, as he realized that since Chu Zan could help him recover from his injuries, it meant that he must have already reached the Tao Supreme Realm. Don't worry, Sect Master. I will not sully the reputation of the Shuang Gate sect, Lai Tian said solemnly. Then let's begin. I'll heal your injuries and reforge your body. Sect Master, just help me recover from my injuries. There's no need to hurry in reforging my body, Lai Tian suddenly said. Chu Zan was surprised. Could it be that Lai Tian had fallen in love with the feeling of being a head floating around? My Tao is different from the past. I won't reforge my physical body until I enter the Tao Supreme Realm, Lai Tian explained. If he was unable to see that person again, even if he reached the Tao Supreme Realm, there was no need to reforge his physical body. He could maintain his current state and just treat it as a form of remembrance. There are no simps in the Zon Gate sect. Chu Zan's mouth twitched. Sect Master, it's not what you think. Actually, we used to roam the world together. She was my big sister, and I was just her little brother, Lai Tian said with a serious expression. Like I'll believe you. However, Chu Zan was too lazy to say anything. That person might really treat Lai Tian as a younger brother, but it might not be the same for Lai Tian. Alright, I can't be bothered with your matters. With a wave of his hand, a transcendent power appeared and enveloped Lai Tian, causing his injuries to gradually recover. The remaining Tao Supreme power that was hindering his recovery was cleared out by Chu Zan. With Chu Zan's help, he was soon healed. However, he was still a floating head. Thank you, Sect Master. Lai Tian was extremely grateful. He condensed two arms on the left and right of his head and cupped his hands in an expression of thanks. The corners of Chu Zan's mouth twitched. The arms were where his ears were, and looked extremely out of place. You've already recovered from your injuries, and it won't be difficult for you to create another Tao. Chu Zan waved his hand and a furnace appeared. Then, he grabbed Lai Tian and stuffed him into the furnace. In an instant, the furnace lit up with various colors, as a mysterious aura surrounded it. Lai Tian was extremely shocked. This furnace was a supreme treasure. This is the Tao Creation Furnace. It can help you quickly create your Tao and stabilize your Tao creation realm. You will be able to recover your strength with this within 100 years. As Chu Zan spoke, he threw the Tao Creation Furnace into the scripture pavilion and no longer paid attention to Lai Tian. The Tao Creation Furnace was not a Tao Supreme treasure, but a Tao Supreme ruler treasure. It was a treasure that the system had rewarded him at the 5,000-year milestone. He flipped open to the Tao Supreme chapter of the Zongate Manual and started to read each chapter. The chapter recorded hundreds of entries regarding the Tao Supreme realm. Chu Zan even suspected that it contained a record of all the cultivation insights of the Tao Supreme realm cultivators that had ever appeared in history. Chu Zan copied a portion of the contents of the Tao Creation Realm chapter and placed it in the scripture pavilion. Chu Zan also added 2 more chapters to the Supreme Booklet's contents in the pavilion. 100 years passed by in the blink of an eye. By this time, Su Shaner had come out of seclusion, having reached the transcendent Tao realm. Chu Zan had already finished reading the contents of the 7th chapter, and his strength had increased by quite a bit. His comprehension of the Tao Supreme realm had also reached a new level. In 100 years, he had only read 7 Tao Supreme realm chapters. From this, one could tell the profoundness of the chapter's contents. Anyone below the Tao Supreme realm would not have been able to glean even the slightest bit of insight from studying it for 100 years. In the Zongate Scripture Pavilion, Lai Tian's aura was majestic. His head was emitting a scarlet-red Tao aura. Within the Tao creation furnace, boundless power surged. When the scarlet-red aura dissipated, Lai Tian opened his eyes. He had finally recovered to the Tao creation realm. Moreover, he was stronger than he had been back then. Lai Tian was very excited. Lai Tian has returned. He could not help but let out a long howl. In the end, the Tao creation furnace trembled and its power pressed him down even more. FCK. He was even being bullied by a treasure. However, to achieve this, it had to be said that the Tao creation furnace was terrifyingly powerful. With its assistance, the Zongate sect would not lack Tao creation realm experts in the future. Combined with the Zongate Scripture Pavilion, it could be said that the sect's foundation was beyond imagination. Lai Tian was certain that as long as the Zongate sect was given enough time to develop, it would definitely become one of the most powerful forces. This boded well for the sect's members and disciples, which included himself. If all of them reached the Tao Supreme realm, the Zongate sect would become the #1 superpower in history. Of course, the prerequisite for this was that Chu Zan had to reach the Tao Supreme ruler realm. Otherwise, no matter how many Tao Supreme realm experts there were, they would not be able to resist a Tao Supreme ruler. Boom! The Tao creation furnace flew out of the scripture pavilion, and Chu Zan pulled Lai Tian out and put away the Tao creation furnace. Then, he threw out more than a dozen Tao creation level treasures. You look like a pauper, so choose from among them yourself, Chu Zan said casually. When Lai Tian came back to his senses and saw all of the treasures, he was shocked. Where did all of these treasures come from? Every treasure here was more powerful than the one he possessed. He looked at one of the crimson spears. Then I won't be polite. On both sides of his head, he condensed 2 arms that picked up a long spear. Su Shaner's eyes widened as she looked at Lai Tian. A floating head with 2 arms growing out from the left and right, it was really too strange and funny. Chu Zan put away the remaining treasures. What he lacked the least were treasures like these. Lai Tian held the crimson spear in its hand. It seemed that he was very satisfied with how suitable it was for him. Since you've already recovered, you should go out and perform some tasks, Chu Zan said. Remember not to be too ostentatious and remain mysterious. Don't expose your identity either. Although you've recovered, there's more than one Tao creation realm expert in the Heavenly Sun world. There are also a few Tao Supreme realm old monsters. Once you expose your identity, you should know what will happen. I understand, Lai Tian said with a solemn expression. Chu Zan waved his hand, and a force descended on Lai Tian's head. This power can prevent you from being monitored and tracked, and from being traced to me. Don't worry, I am a veteran and native of the Heavenly Sun world. Lai Tian felt that Chu Zan was looking down on him too much. Unless it was a Tao Supreme realm cultivator, even if the other party was stronger than him, they would not be able to track him, much less monitor him. He did not believe that Tao Supreme realm experts would show up willy-nilly either. Come back after you're done. Don't show off too much. The Zongate sect needs to maintain a low profile and a sense of mystery, Chu Zan said. I understand. Lai Tian gave him a reassuring look. In the past, the Heavenly Sun world also had a supreme power, but it remained so mysterious that only a few of its disciples traveled the world. Sect Master, don't worry. I will seize the opportunity to establish the might of the Zongate sect while maintaining its sense of mystery. Lai Tian's mission this time was actually very simple. If Yi Lingling and Shui Ping were being bullied, he would show up and kill their enemies, showcasing the strength of the Zongate sect. It just so happened that Yi Lingling had a grudge against the Heavenly Pavilion. Recently, the Heavenly Pavilion had asked Yi Lingling to apologize to them. Naturally, Yi Lingling was not stupid enough to show herself. Up until now, both parties had not come to an agreement. Their grudges were not clearly written off. What Lai Tian needed to do was to seize this opportunity. If the Heavenly Pavilion wanted to cause trouble, he would make them an example to establish the sect's might. Tao Creation Realm experts were all famous in the Heavenly Sun world, and were all regarded as legendary existences. If such a powerful expert like Lai Tian was only a guardian of the sect, then people could only imagine how mysterious and powerful its sect master would be.